What's up, guys? Don't forget to smash that like button, drop a comment, hype up the video, and if you're new here, hit that subscribe and join the family. The story begins in an enclosed place with someone calling for Gun to listen carefully. It is Hugo Otters saying that he will lose his life the next day. Gun asks why he wants him to lose his life so badly. The boy jokes and asks if it's because he's eating 2 chicken drumsticks. Hugo says he is not Taksu but Hugo Otters. Lee understands why he's worried but says he won't lose his life. He also says the number of calamities he eliminated is much greater than all the saints combined and asks if he really thinks he'll be eliminated. Hugo stays silent and remembers the Devil's Tower, the place where the greatest calamity annihilated humanity's lives. All this began on the last day of the 20th century when calamities appeared out of nowhere one day and cornered humanity with overwhelming power. As humans were engulfed by chaos and terror, 12 gods who declared themselves divine beings appeared. They promised humans they would give them power to overcome the calamities, and selected 12 awakened to receive that power. But something unexpected happened. A 13th awakened appeared, and this person received no blessing from any god. Above all that, this awakened was overwhelmingly strong and incredible compared to the other 12 saints. And that is the protagonist, Lee Gun. Hugo thanked him because, thanks to him, they managed to conquer the Devil's Tower this time. The 13th Awakened replied not to just praise himself, but to buy fried chicken for 5 years. Otters asks if he doesn't get tired of fried chicken and repeats again that he's not Taksu. The protagonist says he can't get used to it. People around comment that since the Scarlet Eyes were eliminated this time, they'll probably get incredible rewards, no matter what anyone says, because this is the worst calamity. They'll ask for at least 100 billion won. Lee says they'll ask for a 10-year free pass to a 7-star hotel in Hawaii. Many countries are on the brink of bankruptcy because of the Scarlet Eyes. The boy calls to him and says he needs to make a lot of money to make deals with them, and only then will he be able to fix that face and body that used to be handsome. Gun thinks they call themselves saints but are actually just egotistical bullies. The boy stops and says not to go immediately to a place where an accident happened, just because they summoned him. They need a certain number of victims to give them more money. The 13th Awakened says they will continue and thinks they're filthy and disgusting. And as soon as he defeats the Scarlet Eyes, he will cut any connection he has with them. After walking for a while, they stop and watch in surprise, coming face to face with the boss of the Devil's Tower, the Scarlet Eyes. The protagonist thinks about how they must feel so much pressure just because he looked at them. The boss opens his huge mouth, emitting a loud sound that cracks the ground and causes flames that burst through the ground around the place, causing a huge impact of fire. They panic because the flames are very intense. Smoke spreads through the place and they are still very scared watching the fire in a huge hole. The smoke dissipates and the boss smiles. The girl, trembling a lot, says to run away and they start to run, asking how they should defeat something like that, telling them to flee. Lee watches them run and says they still dare to call themselves saints. He thinks it doesn't matter anyway, because the person who will defeat the Scarlet Eyes is himself. He moves quickly and jumps toward the enemy, but in the end, he is hit by a sword and falls into a trap. He wonders how much time has passed, what it's like outside if the flow of time inside the tower is different from outside, and says he's too lazy to think about all that now. Right now, he just wants to keep striking because this place is a special trap that summons calamities infinitely. Gun is facing them all, missing an arm with a dagger in his mouth, wondering if that alone is enough to eliminate him. He thinks to just wait because he will definitely survive this and rip off the damn heads of those despicable bastards. Time passes, and 20 years later the 13th Awakened is still in the same place, but older, and the monster asks how he got there. The protagonist replies that he is the last one left. The beast calls for help and asks if anyone is there. Lee tells him to scream as much as he wants. Gun easily eliminates him and asks if it's finally over. Then noises start being made and he says he can finally leave now. Stones from the ground begin to rise. In another place, people are in a hurry, saying to go fast and run. They are 2 boys. One asks if he didn't say not to go there, and the other asks how he could know because it was supposed to be safe today. And how could they have known they would encounter high-rank calamities? The desperate boy says they're screwed, and that the fortune teller said he would face an unimaginable monster today, and this must be it. The beast moves quickly to attack them, and they become even more desperate. The boy falls face first to the ground, and the 2 become surrounded by beasts. The boy gets up and thinks that if Lee had survived the Devil's Tower, a calamity like this wouldn't be a problem. Suddenly, a dark place appears in front of them. They look frightened as a strong light is reflected, causing a massive explosion. The 2 don't understand much, and a hole full of flames is created there. The 2 end up trapped by stones above them and ask what happened. Then they look and notice a human coming out of the crumbling tower and ask what that is, and if it's really a human. The person is distant, squeezing his own hand. Lee emits energy around him and asks how they dare to stab him in the back and push him into a trap, calling them bastards and screwed, affirming that they will all lose their lives. Still in the same place, with stones on top of the two boys, they ask what that is. Gun strikes the surrounding beasts. Hitting them, the two boys watch and comment that they can't believe it. And even though those are orange-class calamities that even high-ranking Awakened have trouble dealing with, that guy is eliminating them all as if they were ants. The protagonist eliminates them all, and the two realize they no longer see him and are confused until Gun jumps to where they are. They become very scared and tell him to wait, asking why he is attacking them. The 13th Awakened realizes he's human, and now the path is clear. The two boys are relieved to be alive. Jimin comments that he thinks he came out of the tower and is pretty amazing. His friend asks what to think the tower is, since no one should be able to leave it alive, and it must have been accidental that he was in the area when the tower collapsed. Then they notice something. A huge beast appears. The boys get scared again and say the wolf leader has appeared and think they better start running. The beast has dark eyes, and when it opens its mouth, releases intense flames. They put their hands over their heads while the flames continue being emitted in large amounts around, giving off a great light. Later, still in the same place, smoke moves and the boys open their eyes, asking if they are still alive, until they widen their eyes, seeing Gun in front of them, unharmed. They wonder if they were protected by him. The 13th Awakened insults him and jumps on the beast, clenching his fist and saying that if it's a filthy mutt, it should sit down. He hits his opponent with a terrifying attack. The boys stand with their mouths open. Then the protagonist jumps on the ground after eliminating the beast, saying he's done now and hopes so. He looks back and calls the two, telling them to go. They don't understand, and Lee says to go buy some food for themselves. They stay quietly watching, and Gun also asks for clothes. Later, in a restaurant, someone bangs an empty pot on the table. The boys look at the bill and are surprised that he ate the equivalent of 10,000 riets just in junk food, enough for 120 people to eat. The 13th Awakened says he was told there wasn't much money and held back. They ask what he means by held back. The protagonist asks what that was, and if he hadn't said, he would pay whatever it took as compensation for being saved and orders a portion of ramen. Jimin asks what he is, a disciple or a divine captain, and what he was doing near the tower. Lee replies that he left the tower and ended up there with the two, but they should forget about it and he has something to ask. What is he? Since he doesn't seem like a normal person, and why does he feel magical power coming from him? Jimin's friend answers that it's obviously because he's a disciple and asks if he's not also a disciple who awakened by the blessings of a god. Gun says the gods are assholes and asks why he should serve those bastards. He looks at himself in the reflection of a spoon and gets furious, shouting for a mirror and asking if there's one around. The 13th Awakened takes off his shirt and looks at himself in the mirror, running his hand over his face and noticing that his whole body has recovered, thinking those wounds would be extremely difficult to heal without risking his strength. Now that he notices, his left arm has a symbol of a snake on his hand and the symbol begins to emit a light, growing much stronger. The system notifies that he experienced the end and obtained an impossible achievement. His old stats will be transferred to the new body. All tower achievements will be converted into XP, and he obtained a divine skill. All unique skills and attributes he possesses have been inherited and converted, and now he can use the power of Ophiuchus. Then noises begin to be heard. The protagonist appears in another place with an extremely strong mana surrounding him, standing face to face with a serpent, staring at it. He then extends his hand toward it and touches it, emitting a very strong and intense light. Still at the restaurant, Lee is sitting on the floor confused, and Jimin asks if he's okay. Gun asks if they didn't see a snake just now. Jimin replies he didn't see any snake and that he took off his clothes, ran to the mirror, then grabbed his fist and started shouting. The 13th Awakened asks if others can't see it, then notices something, and a notification appears saying he became the owner of Ophiuchus, followed by various notifications, including one about super regeneration. F. Any damage caused to his body will be restored. The body has been renewed. There is a brief penalty of 50% decrease in physical ability and remaining duration. The protagonist wonders if his physical change is thanks to the super regeneration ability and thinks he hasn't heard of anything like that from the other saints. Besides that, he can't feel the presence of any god. Regardless of what happened, his body is healed, so that's not bad. What he has to do now is eliminate those saints who fled and massacre the bastard who stabbed him in the back. He says he's already getting excited just thinking about torturing those bastards. In another place, where passage is forbidden, people comment that it's true that the impenetrable Devil's Tower collapsed and the whole world will go crazy because of it. The Devil's Tower was a symbol of that place, and someone asks if this is the work of Lee's followers or maybe the work of the disciples who hate him. One of the employees doubts that and says to look at those calamities. Even high-ranked saints would have trouble facing them and wonders who the hell could defeat all those guys and destroy the Devil's Tower, doubting if Gun really survived and came back. The employee says he doesn't know and thinks it's better to wait and see. In another place with cameras, many people are filming and asking what he thinks about the collapse of the Devil's Tower and if he believes there's a chance the 13th Awakened survived. Yang watches and says he has nothing to comment on that. People tell him to wait a moment and ask how he has nothing to say. In another place, someone passes by in a car and inside the car something hits a surface. Wei is very angry and repeats the protagonist's name several times, asking how many times they've mentioned his name today. He wonders if he was alive for 20 years in that tower and thinks that's impossible because there should have been thousands of demonic beasts there, and on top of that, they were all black class. It's a miracle they managed to leave without him knowing they eliminated the Scarlet Eyes, and he wonders how he can survive in that place. His body was already badly damaged by the recoil damage from the protagonist's abilities, and it's not like he received protection like the 12 Saints. But what if he actually came back to life? The Saint of the Aries constellation exhales smoke and says it's all over. In another place, Lee is looking at his cell phone and says that, as expected, he will start by stomping on that bastard first. In another place, a plane lands and someone gets off. The staff say it's an honor to meet one of the 12 constellations, and it is Hugo who gets off the stairs and asks where the Prime Minister is. The subordinates answer that he is waiting for him at his residence and that his vehicle is ready nearby. Otters says to go there. The subordinates are impressed, saying he is so majestic and that this is what a true chosen one looks like. A car moves with Hugo inside until he looks at his ringing cell phone and wonders if it's those reporters again, thinking he can't believe there are stories saying Lee is alive. Otters looks at his ringing cell phone. It's an unknown number and says it's been more than 20 years. He takes the phone and turns it face down, remaining thoughtful until he remembers when he said Lee would lose his life, and Gunn asked if he had so little faith in him. Hugo thinks that when they were attacking the Devil's Tower, he left the tower and fought the misfortunes of disasters outside at Gunn's request, hoping his premonition was wrong, and that he would return safely until he was all injured and asked what happened to the 13th Awakened. The Saints who went in there with Lee discarded him and only returned with the head of the Scarlet Eyes, and because that achievement was recognized, the 12 Saints, including himself, were proclaimed heroes and gained power because of it. At the time, Hugo was treating his wounds in the hospital and couldn't believe Gunn was gone, asking several times for him to be found. Jean said that was too much, and that he should know how many misfortunes came out of that tower, and it was foolish to think the protagonist could leave alive. If he was so worried, he should have looked for him and he wouldn't stop him. But then, the number of saints would be reduced to 11. Otters got very angry. In the present, still inside the car, he looks out the window thinking that no matter how strong Gunn is, it would be impossible. And now it's too late. He ponders about his partner until a subordinate calls and says, "It's the Prime Minister." He answers, and the Prime Minister asks if he's listening. Hugo replies yes and asks what the problem is. The Prime Minister asks if he's also heard the news that it seems the Devil's Tower has collapsed. The Sagittarius Saint wonders if it's that story again and apologizes, saying that if it's to ask him to look for Lee, he will refuse because he died in the Devil's Tower that day, and the things happening in the tower were probably his followers doing. If he's using this situation to get votes, the Prime Minister says it's not that, and if the news just received by the South Korean government is true, shortly ago that line received a call, Hugo asks which line it was. The Prime Minister replies it was Gunn's exclusive direct line. Otters asks if that's true and tells the driver to stop the car. The driver confirms and stops quickly. The Sagittarius Saint thinks that must be the call he just received. He looks at the 30 missed calls and his eyes fill with tears. Then he presses the number that called him and returns the call. A voice on the phone calls him Tak-Soo, says it will find him and eliminate him, and wishes him good luck. Hugo notices the way of speaking and wonders if it might really be Lee, telling the driver to turn the car around immediately and head back to the airport. The driver asks about work in the UK. Hugo asks what that has to do with anything and orders him to go to the airport now. At the restaurant, the protagonist holds the cell phone, saying Tak-Soo has grown a lot and is even ignoring his calls. Jimin asks who he's calling. He replies it's a guy and asks if he said that was a cell phone, saying it's quite interesting. He entered the tower in 2005 and now it's 2025. The world changed a lot during those years. Jimin asks if it's his first time using a cell phone and says he can browse the internet with it and even follow news and videos. Lee asks if he can search for news related to Gun. The boy replies yes, especially since those are the most talked about news right now. The 13th Awakened looks at the news and also notices the comments saying bad things about him. He gets very irritated and starts pressing the cell phone. Jimin says it's his cell phone, The protagonist asks who finished off the Scarlet Eye, calls them bastards, says those assholes were like shitting themselves with fear, and still tried to screw him over, but he doesn't care because it doesn't change anything in his life. Then he notices something and asks about a will, thinking he just remembered that he had decided to donate all his assets to orphanages and school foundations if he lost his life, and wonders if everything went well. He notices the news says he himself donated all his assets, including his relics, to the 12 saints, hoping his wish to save the world continues through them. Then Lee clenches the cell phone harder and says, "They're assholes and he'll wipe out all of them, including those shitty gods." The boy gets worried about his cell phone. Then Gunn stares into space and wonders what he will do, thinking that even if he wants them to know he's back, his current appearance is totally different from 20 years ago. And even if he goes around telling everyone who he is, he'd be treated like a madman. Until he can torture each of the saints, it's better to keep quiet for now. Then he notices something, and the system notifies that someone is watching him. The 13th Awakened recognizes the energy and stands up. The boy asks where he's going. He replies he's going to get some fresh air. Going outside, he encounters energies and avatars, and the protagonist asks if these are the lackeys of the Ares Sanctuary. More notifications arrive saying the avatars are creating a barrier in the name of the Ares Sanctuary. The influence of other constellations has been reduced, and the avatars want him to choose an attribute. Lee calls them bastards and says that even if they're the ones sucking off the gods, does that mean he has to pay for it? Then he hears someone talking about him. When he looks to the side, he faces a couple saying there are so many stories about that guy, they think they'll die from hearing so much crap. And the news only talks about that. They're already tired of it. The man asks why the media gives so much attention to him even if he's a ghost from the past. His wife agrees. Then the boys notice something on the couple's clothes and wonder if they belong to the Gemini Sanctuary. The 13th Awakened steps in front of the couple. Jimin calls him not to fight with those people, but the protagonist stays in the same spot until the man asks what he's looking at and tells him to get lost. The boys think they're screwed. The guy smokes and blows smoke in his face, asking if he lost his ass in front of him and says that if he's bothered, he can come at him. The woman tells them to go or he'll soil himself and insults him again. They walk away saying there will always be idiots like Lee and wondering why they like the weakest saint so much, and if he doesn't think it's a lie that that guy is a saint. Jimin says he did well holding back and that those people are Gemini Knights, above rank A. Then Gun shouts calling them wimps. The Knights turn and ask if he spoke to them and called them wimps. The 13th Awakened sarcastically replies, no, he spoke to whoever gave birth to them and calls them fucking assholes. The guy walks up facing him, telling him to repeat what he said, saying he's an ordinary person whose mana he can't even feel a trace of. The protagonist throws him away with just one finger, causing a big impact. The boys watch surprised and Lee smiles. The woman watches, Gun smiles and calls her, asking if she thought he wouldn't notice behind him. He also moves his fingers and throws her away, saying she makes no difference. The boys ask how he can use skills in the middle of the street. The 13th Awakened asks what they're talking about and says they'd be eliminated if he had used his skill. The two are shocked, wondering if he beat those rank A disciples just with his fists. The protagonist looks aside, ducks, looks at the opponents he just hit, looks at a necklace and pulls it, saying he knew something was strange when he hit him, and asks if that's not a divine artifact and why they have a divine artifact if only saints can have them. Jimin asks if he really doesn't know anything and explains that many decades ago, humanity was almost wiped out by calamities, surviving only thanks to divine beings and the saints they chose. But since the whole world can't be protected by just 12 people, the saints gathered followers and created the divine cathedrals. Those who received power through the saints and awakened are called disciples and were ranked proportionally to their powers. The saints chosen by divine beings are leaders, and the 10 stars can be considered saint candidates. Disciples are divine captains. The power of the divine beings comes from the disciples' faith, so they hold many competitions to recruit people for their divine cathedrals, and selected disciples receive gifts from the divine beings. Lee thinks this happened during the 20 years he was away. The boy points his finger to look there. Gun looks and notices the avatars. More system notifications arrive saying the houses of wealth and greed under Ares are enjoying the situation. They want him to eliminate the man and woman, want to see plasma spilled, and say they'll give him a useful gift if he eliminates both. The boy is desperate, thinking he attracted the attention of the house of gods. They are like shadows of the divine beings. Opposing them is the same as opposing the divine beings. He says to hurry up and do what they want. The 13th Awakened says he was wondering why the idiots from Yang were in a place like this. So they were trying to fill their stomachs with this pig, and for the god's sake, he hasn't changed a bit. He stamps his foot on the ground, emitting extremely intense energy around, causing strong winds nearby. Jimin doesn't understand much, and the protagonist asks how they dare impose themselves on him. Jimin says the House of Gods of Ares fled. and thinks that this guy is definitely not an ordinary person. Lee calls the boy and asks about that bum lying on the ground if he's a Gemini disciple. Jimin replies yes and says they are the divine cathedral with the most influence in this country, an elite force consisting of several influential figures. Gun asks if they then have a shitload of money, and everything he's using is branded, saying the time for looting is the best. The 13th Awakened starts pulling the boy's clothes. In another place, they say they have arrived. Jimin says the apartment he lives in is the one with the lights on the second floor, and the other boy says he lives in the next block. Jimin thanks them for saving them and bringing them home safely. With his eyes closed, he opens one and doesn't understand. The protagonist asks if he's not going to come in since he's sleepy. Jimin wonders if this guy is messing with him. After a while, clothes are torn off and hair is cut. Lee looks in the mirror and says, "It looks good." After cutting his hair and taking a shower, Ji says it looks amazing and asks if he cut his own hair, saying it looks really cool. Gun thinks that in the past, because of the side effects of his abilities, every strand of hair was precious since he would end up bald just from stronger winds, and he never imagined his hair would return to normal. He asks what that is and why there is a calamity inside his house. The 13th Awakened crushes it, and Min asks if he eliminated the creature in his hand, saying even professionals wouldn't be capable of that. The protagonist says it's not just one coming and asks what these creatures saw in him. Ji asks if he's not exuding an aura that attracts calamities. Lee says that's impossible, and usually means something in the house is attracting them, probably because of those evil relics he has. Min asks about evil relics and says they were given by the Gemini saint, and even if they're not his, they are still items blessed by a saint. The objects fall to the floor. Gun says this mask is a divine relic that monitors whoever wears it. He starts throwing the items away, saying this music box is a divine relic that steals personal information, that watch attracts calamities, and those damned saints not only stole his money, but also sell evil relics to people, along with selling their information. And he's pissed just thinking about it and wants to throw it all away. Then he hears a noise and someone enters. The 13th Awakened asks who it is. Ji says it's Sungjae. The man observes and says he himself owns this house, emitting great mana. The protagonist replies he understands. Meanwhile, at the Ares sanctuary, Yang's residence, he asks if the Korean avatars have disappeared. The subordinate replies yes, and that the Korean Central is in total chaos. Wei wonders who could have done that, thinking an avatar is a direct subordinate of the gods, and only an extremely strong awakened could repel them. He orders to contact the other saints to ask if they're involved. The subordinate says they haven't been able to reach Sagittarius yet. Young asks if it's Hugo and says no need to worry, sure he went to the UK to play mercenary. The subordinate says he heard that as soon as he arrived in the UK, he headed elsewhere. Wei asks where. The subordinate replies he was going to Korea. Yang thinks that Hugo was a close friend of Lee's and wonders if it's related to rumors that Gun survived, and if that means it's really true. Wei grabs an object and throws it, saying that's impossible, and asks for something more detailed, anything. The subordinate says that where one of the avatars disappeared, a Gemini disciple was found unconscious, said to be fainted in the middle of the street, and according to reports, he entered. He got into a fight with a handsome guy. Yang asks about a handsome guy and says then it's not Lee, thinking that anyway things haven't been going well lately and it's possible he's alive and returned. For some reason, the Korean avatars disappeared and, worst of all, recently, they failed to defeat the Spider Queen. If things continue like this, he could lose his position. He orders to prepare his jet. The subordinate asks if he's thinking of going there personally. Wei replies yes, and that he needs to see with his own eyes. He grabs his suit and continues wondering what the hell is happening in Korea. In Korea, at the Gemini-affiliated hospital, a young man lies in bed with equipment, and an old man angrily asks who the bastard was that did this to his grandson. The bald man tells him not to worry, and that's why the Gemini Sanctuary sent him. Elsewhere, Sung asks if they met today in the Devil's Tower, saying that guy handled all the calamities alone and unarmed, and even knocked out a Class A. G replies yes. Jay, irritated, asks if that makes sense and says he even destroyed all the relics in the house too. The protagonist says they were all fake. Sung asks which sect he belongs to. Lee asks if he needs one. Jay asks about the god he serves. He replies that he serves none of the idiots among the 12 gods and only serves himself. Sung continues asking questions, including what awakened class he is. Gun asks if he's a worker. The 13th Awakened asks for his name. The protagonist replies with his name. Jay begins to emit great mana and says he came to someone else's house without permission, destroyed relics, and on top of that, said that's his name. Sung emits terrifying energy and asks how he dares to imitate Lee. Min warns them they're in the house and calls him crazy. The system notifies that the magical energy of the Gemini Temple is being released. Gun says that's awesome and looks like he's about to blow up the whole house. The system notifies activation of a skill and fixation on the Eye of God showing data. Kion, House Gemini, Awakened Class A, Title The Punisher, and Possessed skills. Witch Stake S, Ice Capsule Seals with Traits Genius, Clairvoyance, Obsessive Stubbornness, and Idle Admirer. Lee thinks he's using high-level summons at such a young age, and his genius trait is not just for show. J continues emitting energy, and G tells them to run fast because he's an awakened Class A affiliated with the Gemini Sanctuary, and, moreover, a fanatic admirer of Lee. Sung asks if Min is deaf and tells him to get moving and leave if he doesn't want to get screwed. Gun appears behind him and says that if he keeps playing with fire, he'll wet his pants. Jay asks when he appeared there. The 13th Awakened attacks him and throws him away, saying that idiot will burn not only the whole house, but the entire building by now. Min asks if he's not eliminated. The protagonist replies he's fine. G looks aside and notices him fallen with a bump on his head and foam at his mouth and runs there. Lee says he's going to bed first and that he'll wake up when it's time. Opening the door, he faces many miniatures of Lee on a counter. Gun asks what those things are. Min replies that he said Sung was a fanatic. Jay tells him not to carelessly touch them, saying the 13th Awakens collection is more precious to him than his own life. The protagonist tears the doll's head off and says that's making him feel like shit. Sung shouts for him to stop and calls him crazy. Lee says he already said he's not crazy, but Gun is. Jay begins to cry and scream. Elsewhere, yesterday afternoon's news reports on 2 Gemini affiliates attacked by an unknown suspicious man, and according to witnesses, the perpetrator stole the victim's belongings and clothes. Hugo thinks that's definitely Lee's doing and wonders what that bastard is up to. That's the kind of news he hears as soon as he arrives in Korea. The waitress approaches and asks what he would like to order. Otters tells her to stop that crap and tells Yang to get out of there. Wei says he noticed right away and it wasn't even funny. It's been a while and he couldn't contact him, and it seems he got a taste of Lee judging by how he came to Korea, and it's better to tell everything he knows about him. The Sagittarius Saint says that's why he hates him and calls him a perverted possessor of another's body. The Aries constellation Saint quickly changes his expression and asks what he was doing. Hugo thinks that guy pulling ridiculous pranks like that needs to find Lee before others do. In Gyeonggi-do Bucheon, inside the market, Ji says maybe that guy really is Lee. Sung asks if he's joking because he looks different, and Gun is a hero who saved humanity and asks if he really thinks he's that delinquent. Min says he's sure he saw him leave the Devil's Tower and that his strength isn't just anyone's, asking if he really is. Jay interrupts saying no, he's sure because that's what his father told him and thinks they better hurry to settle this. Suddenly someone shouts there's a thief. A man runs quickly between them. The two fall to the ground and G asks if that speed is a Scorpio affiliate. Sung replies he's using power to steal. All belongings and wallets in the supermarket will be stolen if they let him. The thief thinks they're idiots and that they won't catch him at that speed even if they're affiliates. He got most of the stuff and is heading somewhere else. The protagonist blocks him from running further and says he caught him. The thief can't believe it. Min asks why he came there. Lee replies he came because he forgot to ask to buy chicken. A bald man says he's really good because it's very hard to catch a Scorpio affiliate since they're very agile. The bald man is Hoon and continues saying he looks like just an ordinary believer judging by his energy, and that next time he should report to the police first. Gun wonders who this bastard is. Then noises start and everything begins to shake. The thief wonders what's happening and if it's an earthquake, thinking it's better to run when he gets the chance. He starts running again, thinking he almost got caught because of that weirdo, but found a chance to escape thanks to the earthquake. Then he notices something and faces a giant monster, asking if it's a calamity and why there's a calamity in a green zone, thinking he should run before getting involved. The thief jumps, thinking that even if it's a strong calamity, he won't catch him at that speed, until the monster opens its huge mouth toward him, defeating him. People there watch the huge calamity beside them until a voice warns that this isn't a simulation, that a calamity is occurring inside the market and civilians must evacuate as soon as possible. According to the Queen Spider's appearance, the danger rating of this market is red zone. They repeat it once more. Due to the Queen Spider's appearance, the danger rating is a red zone. A child is about to be swallowed, but the protagonist jumps on the beast and tells the child to be more careful, asking if he's okay. The little boy runs off quickly. Lee says at least he seems fine and asks what kind of market has more calamities than people. He summons his serpent and asks if after all this time he should train a bit. Elsewhere, a car passes with Yang inside, telling to repeat that. The voice repeats that a calamity appeared in a supermarket in Bushin City. Wei replies he doesn't care and asks what kind of calamity it was. The voice says it's the Queen Spider. The Aries constellation Saint thinks they failed the last raid and barely sealed her, wondering if she escaped. He thinks he can't handle a red-class calamity alone. After calamities appeared, humanity divided them into 6 classes by danger level: blue, pure divine dominion, green, safe, yellow, alert, orange, evacuate, danger, red calamity-controlled area, and black, human survival, impossible. If the queen spider appeared, that market must have become a red zone. The driver asks what they should do about the supermarket. Yang replies to have them bury everything. The driver doesn't understand and asks to confirm. Wei thinks no one can find out about this because it would be a huge mess if people knew more damage was caused because they hid that they failed the raid and says to report that everyone inside was eliminated and send affiliates to bury the entire building. Elsewhere, there are many spiders. Hoon uses his skill and calls them damn insects, freezing them with his ice prison skill and says not to underestimate an S rank. The frozen spiders break the ice. The bald man is surprised, wondering how they easily broke his ice magic. The protagonist tells him to get out of the way because the boss has arrived. Hoon wonders when this guy appeared. Lee calls them bastards and asks if they're so hungry they decided they want to eat humans. He throws the cans he was holding toward them, attacking and cutting them, asking who they think they're opening their mouths to. Gun, sword in hand, says weak mobs like them should know their place. The two boys look surprised, and the system notifies that calamities were eliminated, Zodiac experience increased, and new crafting materials acquired. The 13th Awakened asks what these crafting materials are. More notifications arrive saying he can build skills and relics using the materials obtained. He wonders if his crafting skill has changed too and thinks he'll have to try it later. Moving isn't so bad considering his physical abilities are only at 50% due to the penalty. Maybe he can use more power than before he left. Hoon thinks he got rid of those S-rank calamities he couldn't stop. The bald man watches and wonders where this guy came from. He approaches, calling him an atheist, saying he knew something was strange and that he was the one who attacked their affiliates. The protagonist remembers the couple he attacked earlier, hits him, tells him to shut up, and asks how he found out. Hoon, lying on the ground, asks how he wouldn't know, saying those clothes and the badge were taken from their affiliates after beating them up, and that badge is an S-rank relic only possessed by Gemini affiliates. He bets the reason he's unbelievably strong is because he's carrying that relic. Lee asks why that crap is with him. He crushes the badge and says it's disgusting. Hoon calls him an asshole and a crazy bastard. Gun says relic's my ass, that at most it's decoration, and can't believe he and the guy from the bar are still delinquents after 20 years. The monster opens its huge mouth, emitting a loud noise. The 13th Awakened stays alert and G points his finger showing the huge beast and people running desperately. The bald man says it's the queen spider. The protagonist, with mana around his body, runs at the monster, strikes it, and tells it to go fuck itself, causing a huge impact. People are scared, and the two boys surprised. Hoon wonders what that is and thinks he charged the queen spider without a relic. Then a voice tells all Gemini affiliates in the supermarket to listen. The bald man realizes the voice is Bishop Choi. Sung wonders if it's telepathy. Hoon says it is. The bishop orders the two to leave the building immediately, saying Ares personnel are about to demolish the building completely. Yang is coming personally, and they can't stop him. The queen spider in the supermarket is a monster even he couldn't eliminate. That's why they're desperate to bury this place. And it would be problematic if their mistakes were exposed. Since he rented a teleport skill, he should grab Jay and get out of there. The bald man asks if it's only the two of them. His eyes widen. Meanwhile, at the same place, people are getting up injured with monsters nearby. The protagonist fights them. Hoon watches. Choi asks if there's a problem. The bald man replies, no problem. Sung, irritated, asks if it wouldn't be enough to beg for help and what he means, asking if he doesn't see the chaos now, saying he's basically telling everyone there to be buried alive. Hoon replies he knows, but says to think carefully because if people hear the queen spider appeared in the city center, what will citizens think? Jay doesn't understand. The bald man says citizens will definitely reproach the divine sanctuary, their devotion will be shaken, and God's power will weaken. Humanity's devotion must be unshakable to receive divine protection from the gods. There are 2 teleports left, so 2 people can go. Only he should go with one. And there was an order, so he's going to take him out of there. Sung asks about his friend, saying he can't leave him there, and there are still many people not evacuated. Hoon calls him a stupid bastard, says it's not time to argue, and he has no intention of being eliminated there because of an incompetent little shit like him. But he can't go against the Saints' orders and will get rid of all the dead weight, so there'll be no choice. Jay calls him a despicable bastard and emits energy. The bald man asks if he really intends to fight him and says they're on different levels, telling him to forget that futile pride and make a smart decision, until he feels something on his back and falls to the ground. Someone arrives and asks why they're still there. It's the protagonist saying it's dangerous and to get out quickly. Sung says the exit is blocked because of the calamity and they can't leave. They'll have to use teleport or eliminate all the calamities. Many are injured, and the Ares constellation sect is barricading the place. Lee says it's a headache. Hoon gets up very angry and asks how he dares crush him. Gun says he thought he had abandoned people and fled alone. The bald man tells him to shut up, calls them idiots, and says to try surviving alone. At least get out of there alone until someone approaches behind him. It's the queen spider trapping him with webs. He looks and is swallowed by the spider. His cell phone falls to the ground. They look surprised. The 13th Awakened tells the two he can handle this, to take care of the injured, that he'll leave when he can and will finish quickly. Still at the same place, Yang arrives and asks how things are. The subordinates say they barricaded around the store and are putting the entire building on alert. Wei says for something they started before he even got there, it's not a big deal. The subordinate asks why the barricade isn't working well. The other agrees and says it seems to be blocked. A great light is emitted, reflecting in their eyes. Yang is surprised to see a snake, and people start running desperately to escape because the calamity is inside and there are still people trapped there while someone has captured the spiders. Wei hears them say someone caught the spiders and thinks that's impossible since even he can't catch one, wondering how they managed it and says he'll see for himself. The subordinates say there could still be calamities inside. He replies it doesn't matter and tells everyone to stay alert. Yang moves quickly through the area until he stops, surprised to see the spider eliminated, wondering how someone managed to kill it and who it was. There are signs of a battle and he wants to know what happened and if someone is really hunting the queen spider. Wei puts his hand on his head and says things are getting more problematic with more concerns, then notices an energy and rushes to the window thinking about that bastard, wondering why that fucker is there. Hugo. He wonders if he's behind this and thinks it could make sense until he hears someone asking how he's been without himself, what happened and if something's wrong. It's the protagonist saying it's been a while and asking why he looks like he ate something he didn't like. Wei turns indignantly, barely able to speak. A green rotating light is turned on and the rescue team begins removing the injured, asking people to clear the way because it's dangerous. The two boys watch with a cloth over them. Sung wonders if that guy really is Lee, thinking he looks different, but those movements definitely are his. Then someone calls him. It's Hugo, asking why he's there. Jay asks when he came back. The Sagittarius Saint asks if that's how he talks to his father. His friend smiles while Sung is irritated. Otters looks and says everything is okay, and at least it seems they're not hurt. A bit of medical help should be more than enough. More importantly, he asks if he was the one inside that supermarket, hearing the calamity was ended and who eliminated it. He thinks that's serious and wonders who he'll go after next. Then he hears G asking if Gun should be okay. Hugo runs to him immediately, asking if he just said Gun and where he is, and if he knows him. Min apologizes and asks if he means the Saint, saying he's inside the supermarket now and was the one who defeated the Queen Spider, saying his name was Gun. The Sagittarius Saint asks for more details until he sees an explosion inside. Smoke dissipates and the surroundings are destroyed. Yang is panting. Lee appears before him saying he's quite exaggerated and that they've known each other for 20 years, asking if he attacks him out of nowhere. Wei asks who the hell he is, thinking he looks a bit like Gun but wonders if his face wasn't full of scars and his voice sounds different. And it's impossible he's so young. He calls him a bastard and asks how he dares pretend to be Lee, saying he was startled for a moment. The 13th Awakened asks what pretending means. Yang asks how he dares not to know the place and try to fight him, asking if he's ready for what's coming. The protagonist hits him. Wei asks what the hell that was, and Lee asks if he thought he was playing. He throws him away with his strike, causing a big impact. Wei falls to the ground. Gun approaches and says they really need to get beaten before listening to others, asking if life got better after getting rid of him in the tower, saying they stole his relics and, from what he heard, even forged his will. Yang replies that's exactly what happened. The 13th Awakened, clenching his fist, says it's all right, that he was going to eliminate them all anyway, and will start by giving them a lesson. Then we'll go after his house, the sanctuary, the relics, and the remains of the other damn saints, and we'll destroy everything. Yang's nose starts to emit vitality, thinking he won't allow that, and from how he acts and speaks, he's not bluffing. He didn't manage to see his moves earlier and wonders if he really is Lee and returned after surviving the tower, saying it's impossible. But if it really is him, Wei starts flying with intense energy around him, saying to prove it. The mana grows more intense. Gun watches, and the system notifies that the Master of Ares, the Jade Emperor God, has revealed himself. He asks if only part of the god appeared. Yang moves his fingers, using his chain skill to restrain him, asking if they still seem weak to him, saying he doesn't know how he returned from the tower. Wei uses his true skill, Divine Armament, summoning an old man, and his aura becomes more terrifying. The 13th Awakened says it's incredible. Yang tells him to shut up and be eliminated. He attacks with his extremely powerful skill, causing an explosion and a huge impact. Wei wonders if he died, saying he was surprised to see him return from the Devil's Tower but remains stupid. And that him fighting directly against Wei, who leveled up multiple times with experience points, is idiotic. He asks if he thought they spent the last 20 years playing around. Then he notices lights being emitted and can't believe it. Multiple swords start spreading out, and the protagonist emerges from among them, hitting his opponent in the face and throwing him away again. Yang wonders how he survived that blow and asks if it's really Lee. He replies that he finally recognized him, says that's right, he truly returned, and asks what happened for even his weapons to smell like shit. Wei is surprised because even that kind of recovery is impossible, even for Aquarius healers. The system notifies that he had a near-death experience. The conditions were met, and the 13th sense skill was unlocked. The protagonist thanks him for getting stronger because of it, and now he asks what he thinks about trying something out, until Yang says to wait. More notifications arrive saying that the god Ares is shocked by Lee. He whines, asking why he's still alive, and the god Ares trembles, exclaiming that it's impossible. Then Ares disappears in a storm of curses. Wei, desperate, asks what the hell is going on and why a god is disappearing, and Gun asks if maybe it's because he knows it doesn't make sense. He says he's feeling merciful, so he'll just make him feel the same amount of pain he did. The subordinates enter the place and ask what's going on there. They notice the defeated monsters. Hugo stops and senses the energy, realizing it's from the Saint of the Aries constellation. He thinks this definitely has to be his friend's doing. A mess like this could only be his. The subordinates say something's wrong because they can feel their boss's energy from here, and ask if it's not too weak to say he's alive and what happened there. Then they notice something, and Otters has mana surrounding his body and asks if they can back off for a second. They look around in panic until an explosion happens. The Sagittarius Saint jumps onto the ground and sighs, insulting his partner and calling him a bastard upon seeing Yang defeated, with a note on him saying, "Fucked shithead," and wonders what kind of mess he's going to make next. The protagonist asks if the artifact Wei stole from him is there. He enters the place and finds people filming. There's a statue of Yang in the middle. Lee says that bastard is so obsessed with looking rich that he's showing off his fortune like that. Then he notices the scent of his divine artifact coming from there. He wonders what's up with these fake replicas and thinks it looks like he took these clothes from his house, but all the weapons are fake, until he notices something. It's a toothpick he himself used, and he says he finally found his precious. Suddenly, people start looking scared. The red siren lights up. The subordinates say it's a thief, and all guards must go to Area B. Meanwhile, Gun is relaxed after having broken the glass and holding the toothpick in his hand. Several guards approach, telling him to raise his hands, drop the item, and surrender peacefully. The 13th Awakened looks at them and says he's not in the mood. He starts twirling the toothpick in his hand and the guards feel pain and collapse to the ground. The protagonist says he really should use something he's familiar with and asks if he doesn't think so too. And it's nice to see him again and calls him Lima. More notifications arrive saying he discovered a divine artifact, and Limo creates everything. Divine Artifact of Creation Guidance S, with S-Class shape-shifting traits. The conditions to unlock the Creation Workshop skill were fulfilled. A 1.5-meter workshop was created. The standard scope, Creation Workshop, was unlocked, and the Production Workshop, Repair Fortification Workshop, Dismantling Workshop, all with the creation skill embedded. The traits of Limo creates everything can be granted. Lee asks what he thinks about leaving now. Another notification arrives saying the energy of Ares' divine artifact can be strongly felt. Gun says it'd be a bit disappointing to leave empty-handed. It's time to farm. Hugo asks if he arrived too late. He sees people running in panic and shouts for his friend, while the 13th Awakened is calmly starting to feel hungry, until Otters shouts louder for him. The protagonist asks if that's Taksu. The Sagittarius Saint runs toward him, calling him a bastard. Lee calls him a bastard and says he really thinks he is his friend. Then his partner runs past him and hugs the guy behind. And Hugo says that if he was alive, he should have come to see him immediately, asks what he's doing right after coming back, and if his leg is okay, saying his body isn't in good shape, and asking where he's going in such a hurry. Gun looks at him, hits him, and asks if he can't even remember his friend's face. The guy thinks it was a perfect flying kick. Otters falls to the ground, and the 13th Awakened asks if he wants him to beat him up, and says there's something else he should be confused about. The Sagittarius Saint watches and says it's his friend's artifact, Limo. And if he really is, the protagonist interrupts, asking if he wants to get beat up to get his head straight. Hugo immediately hugs him and starts crying emotionally, saying he's really alive, until Lee hits him and asks why the hell he's hugging him out of nowhere, and Otters says he really is his friend. The system notifies that the god of Sagittarius, Apollo, has appeared. He is summoned with a great light surrounding him and with his eyes closed, smiles. Hugo looks and wonders why he's showing up there. The god Apollo looks around and expresses doubt about Lee's survival and wants them to check if that's really him. Apollo aims his bow and arrow at Gun, saying something should happen if he shoots a fire arrow at him. The 13th Awakened, irritated, says he should just finish off this damn god since the guy is already pointing an arrow at someone he just met. His partner holds him back and tells him to stop, saying it's fine and that he's not hurt. The protagonist asks what's fine and says it's better to take care of some matters now. He's going to eliminate him and wishes him good luck. He just got out of the tower and found out his house was sold, his reputation destroyed, and all his relics vanished. And for now, he's just going to punch him. Lee hits him. The Sagittarius Saint, with a bump on his head, says he really is his friend and that it's wonderful and thinks the guy hit really hard. Then several people approach, saying they found him and to catch him because he's the guy who stole the relics. Gunn realizes he was being chased. Hugo asks what he stole. The 13th Awakened shows the bag next to him and says it was nothing serious. Otters asks if he stole the relics from Young's storage. He replies that it's a good thing. The Sagittarius Saint calls him crazy for doing that. The guards talk among themselves to arrest him right away. The leader says that guy isn't someone they can handle, and that bastard won't be able to do anything, even if he called another like him. Then a strong wind begins. They ask what the hell is going on. Something approaches. The leader says he's here. It's a creature with giant claws. It lands on the ground. The avatar of Ares, the beast of wealth, Pishu, and they need to be careful as all relics and riches can be stolen. The creature opens its huge mouth. Hugo says this is bad, and that it's the avatar of Ares. He thinks it's better to leave behind the things they stole from Wei and flee. The protagonist tells him to relax because he has a plan. He asks for a knife for his artifact. Limo emits light from its eyes and energy around, pulling a knife from its mouth. Lee grabs it and smiles with the knife in hand, thinking it's going to be tough using this against an avatar in this state. He emits a great energy around himself and says to reveal its true form, the one that once belonged to Dormant. The Sagittarius Saint wonders about all this power. Gunn strikes the sword against the ground and says that now it's become something useful. The system notifies that the relic awakened thanks to the power of the Ophiuchus constellation. And due to the snake hunter traits of this constellation, the sword was granted the fatal strike trait. The blade became sharper and its power increased. And now he can see the opponent's vital points and can see the path to the end. He realizes this is a new skill he received, 13th sense. And he really can see that monster's weak points and he's going to stomp on it. Otters observes and says it's true, and that taking the lead and charging in was always his way of doing things, and he's going forward even if it's really dangerous, and that he might be able to finish it all now. The monster slams its paw on the ground and Hugo shouts for his friend. A voice asks why he's yelling so loud. It's the 13th Awakened, lifting the beast's paw, insulting the creature and saying he almost died just from smelling those feet. But now, it's his turn. The monster doesn't understand much until one of its paws is torn off and it starts screaming loudly. Another notification arrives to be careful as the Beast of Wealth has used its ability. The monster continues to emit a loud noise and sucks up all the wealth in the area. The protagonist says he wouldn't be punished if he had stayed quiet, and the trait of the Ophiuchus constellation is being activated. And he says he'll start slow and uses the Snake Hunter trait, attacking his opponent with incredible power and causing a massive explosion. People are terrified while Lee is smiling after destroying the whole place. Hugo is impressed with that power and realizes it's the same as his friend had at his peak. The system notifies that the avatar was defeated, and divine points have increased, and asks if he wants to take the Beast of Wealth as his avatar. Gunn doesn't quite understand and asks about that since an avatar is something only the 12 gods command, and wonders if it's even possible to do such a thing. He touches the beast. A great mana is emitted around the beast's body, and it becomes the avatar of Ophiuchus. Current number of avatars, 1. And the beast shrank in size to hug its owner. The 13th Awakened, holding the beast in his hand, says it'll make a fine treasure chest since it's the Beast of Wealth. The Sagittarius Saint asks if he really made an avatar from another sanctuary become his own, and wonders what must have happened for him to get a skill like that. The system notifies that he can give a name to the avatar, Pishu. The protagonist asks about a name and shouts it'll be Piggy Bank. Elsewhere, a voice says traitor, and Otters, indignant, asks if he knows how worried he was about him. Lee asks if he's wrong and says he got married, started a family, and enjoyed life while his friend was trapped in the tower. There was someone trying to escape the tower, while someone who called himself a friend was living a happy life. And he even wonders if he ever thought about going after him, and asks if that's really how a friend should act. He says he can't even recognize the friend he reunited with after 20 years, and says he doesn't think he can be robbed in his own house. Hugo replies that it doesn't matter, and he can stay there for a while since he lives alone. Gunn says he said something unnecessary, and to lighten the mood, the Sagittarius Saint says he's not divorced, and his wife, but then says it's better to leave that alone and talk about him, and asks what happened in the tower, thinking he won't tell Sung and Yuha about his friend since they're fanatics. He says that back then he was fighting the calamities outside, so He doesn't know what happened inside the tower and asks why the others were the ones carrying the head of the Scarlet Eyes instead of him. The 13th Awakened says there's a sad story behind it. He was stabbed in the back and thrown into a trap in a place full of calamities. Besides the countless calamities appearing, the Scarlet Eyes also came back to life. Hugo, surprised, asks if the Scarlet Eyes really returned. The protagonist says yes, and the Scarlet Eyes they saw weren't his true body. The real Scarlet Eyes was much deeper inside the tower, and he managed to defeat those bastards. But the real problem wasn't the Scarlet Eyes, it was the true administrator of the tower. That guy could revive defeated calamities, and somehow got out of there. And at one point, the protagonist thought it was really the end for him. In a final life-or-death struggle, he finished the administrator and passed out after using all his strength. And he remembers clearly, he was definitely taken down. And when he woke up, those hellish monsters were no longer in the cave, and he doesn't know why, but he gained his current abilities. And one thing's for sure, the bastard who stabbed him in the back knew the structure of the Devil's Tower since the guy trapped him in a cave filled with countless calamities, as if he already knew its location. And he'll definitely beat up those who stole his stuff and talked crap about him. But for the guy who betrayed him, he's preparing something special, and he needs to get ready for it. He needs to create the gear he'll use to beat them down. The system notifies the Creation Workshop, which summons a workshop capable of creating anything, and it's searching for materials that can be used for crafting. It asks if he'd like to use materials to create divine relics. And here's the list of usable materials. Corrupted essence of the Queen Spider with absorbable accumulated magic power. Calamity Fragment, which increases the success rate and power of the divine relic. And, in addition, several divine relics from Ares were detected. Lee asks if they should just throw everything in. The creation of the divine relic begins. A great light is emitted, shining through the windows until the divine relic is completed, and an ego is born. It's an imitation horse, and if you write a name on the relic, the owner of that name can absorb the magic power of anyone who touches it, capable of absorbing 10% of a person's magic per hour, and it has strong loyalty to its master. Gun thinks it's great, and says a divine relic with ego can grow on its own. Hugo says that for a high-level piece of equipment that has an ego, it doesn't look that cool. The 13th Awakened gets irritated and asks if he's seriously saying that, and if he knows how many materials he had to use to make it, and says he was wondering if he should use the leftover materials to make another piece of equipment, but now thinks it's better to drop it. The Sagittarius Saint says the design is amazing and that he really is a genius for being able to create a divine relic, and he was just talking about how it didn't look cool and that he should treat a divine relic with respect. The protagonist says it'll depend on how well it performs from now on, and they need to start dealing with those fake saints. Otters asks how they're going to do that and says it won't be easy to get the other saints out of their own territory. Lee grabs a chest and asks if this wouldn't be enough to lure them out. Hugo is surprised, saying that's Ares' real divine relic, the Golden Fleece chest. The system shows it can store anything, including multiplying items inside it if the price is paid. The Sagittarius Saint says that's one of the best among the real divine relics and asks why he brought it if he can't use it. Gunn says he heard Tak is a saint without money, so he brought it to finance them. Otter says he's not poor, and the higher the relic's rank, the more materials it costs. And they'll use it to multiply materials and also make divine relics that can mess them up. He asks how they'll do that since no one there can activate it. The 13th Awakened asks if he really can't use it. Hugo replies that he's not an Ares saint, he's Sagittarius. The protagonist says he gets it, but thinks he can use it. The Sagittarius Saint says he can't, and they need to find another method. Lee says he already sent a declaration of war to the broadcast station. Otters asks where he sent it. Gunn says he doesn't think they have a choice but to find another way. Hugo asks again what he sent to the broadcast station and calls him a crazy bastard. Blue House, Korea. Elsewhere, a voice calls someone idiots and says they couldn't even take out a single spider and were humiliated too. It's the Divine Captain, who keeps saying they should just stick to selling good luck charms and questions why they're even fighting against calamities. A young man tells him to watch his words. Oliver says he heard some random man took down the Spider Queen and wonders if that dead guy Lee came back to life or something. Someone smashes something on the table and tells him not to cross the line. Choi says he seems obsessed with Gunn's hero stories. The Divine Lion asks what's the problem because, if it's Lee, he could definitely take out the Spider Queen easily and asks if they haven't seen that famous Russian subjugation video. Hyuk replies that was only because he got buffs from other saints, and his weapons were given by them too. With that kind of support, they could have done better. Oliver says maybe he just didn't have enough support and that's why he failed to defeat the Spider Queen. The Divine Gemini releases mana around him and says he's clearing things up. It was Ares who took out the Spider Queen, thanks to the sacrifice of an S-rank disciple. The Divine Lion asks if Ares really has someone that powerful, says he'd love to meet them, and figures he'll have to look inside the Spider Queen's stomach. The two stand face to face, mana surging around them. The president mutters to himself, wondering when the Blue House became home to a bunch of bullies. Then a subordinate bursts through the door saying something big just happened, and to turn on the news immediately. The reporter announces urgent news. The broadcast station just received a mysterious package, and inside were photos of who's assumed to be Yang, along with a short message. Handwriting analysis confirmed with 99% certainty that it was written by Lee. Elsewhere, Hugo is furious, asking what the hell he was thinking when he sent that. The protagonist replies he was thinking about a declaration of war and is telling them to get ready to have their heads ripped off. Otters calls him an attention addict and says taking down Wei was already a big problem, so why announce it like that? Gunn says Yang isn't completely finished, and technically speaking, he's alive, but not really living. The Sagittarius Saint doesn't quite get it. Lee shows a stuffed toy and says, "This is Wei." Wei thinks to himself that Lee is a huge bastard. The 13th Awakened and his constellation abilities, Creation Workshop, God's Gaze, 13th Sense, Super Regeneration, Body of 100 Poisons, and Battle God's Instinct. Hugo asks if that could actually be Yang. Wei thinks to himself to let him go, and the protagonist says his skills got a lot better with that fight. He can even contain Yang's soul now. The Sagittarius Saint says something like that is even possible. Lee says that's not what matters now, and to look at this. Otters asks what it is. Gunn replies it's the knife that was stuck in his back, the one that led him into the trap. Hugo holds the blade that brought his partner down, and judging by the engravings, it doesn't look like an ordinary knife. And if he was stabbed, then it definitely wasn't Yang. The 13th Awakened says it's best to cut evil at the root, and he's going to stop by the Divine Relic shop. The Sagittarius Saint asks if it's the Divine Relic store and why they're going there. The protagonist says that Sack Hair over there said he saw those engravings somewhere in the store and asked to borrow some clothes. His friend says he can wear anything from that closet. Elsewhere, Lee says he'll leave him in charge of the house and calls him Slave 2. Otters asks about Slave 1. Gunn replies that he'll be right back. In another destroyed place, professionals are observing the area, and a woman says that Saint Nim and the Ares Saint are also not there, and she can't sense the divine energy of God either. The saint in another location asks if that's really the case and wonders where he might have gone. The subordinate asks if maybe he disappeared with all the fortune. Sophie says it's a dilemma, and it'll be a huge problem if he made a deal with another saint behind their backs, and wonders where that bald pig ran off to. The subordinate says it's possible that Lee, who just returned, kidnapped him. Marty starts laughing loudly and calls her sister, saying the jokes aren't funny, and screams on the phone. The subordinate asks for forgiveness for saying something unnecessary. The Aquarius Saint says it's fine and she'll head to the Divine Relic store as planned. So be ready, and they need to sell Divine Relics to raise the necessary funds for the drachma auction. Someone enters the room she's in and says there's a major problem. The other saint also submitted a request to participate in the drachma auction. At the Lion's Gym, people look surprised. Someone calls for Steven and says they heard Gunn's Divine Relic will appear at the auction. Nim looks furious and drops the weights to the ground, asking if it's finally shown up, and says Lee's Divine Relic will be theirs. Elsewhere, energy is being emitted and they appear quickly. The protagonist says teleports are pretty handy, and Sung says they're usually very expensive, but they're free for Gemini affiliates. Divine Relic Store Complex. Lee thanks him and says he was looking for an appraiser, and he was introduced to an SS rank one. Jay says it's no big deal and remembers Choi asking if he remembers the man who defeated the Spider Queen and told him to keep an eye on him no matter what, and that he would give him any support needed. Sung is holding his phone, looking at messages from his leader. Gunn asks if his boss is bothering him after that incident. Jay replies yes. The 13th Awakened says to take this back. He used it well against the insects. It's the wish of Janus, and its ability summons two-faced soldiers, red soldier, sadistic, blue soldier, masochistic, and activates a random ability. Sung asks if that thing wasn't rusted back then. The protagonist replies that he fixed it, the effects are a bit different now, and not to be surprised later. Jay thanks him and Lee asks about this place, and if it's where the SS rank appraiser is. Then the people around look over attentively, saying someone like that in a place like this, and that she's so beautiful. The Aquarius Saint, Sophie Mard. She says she'd like to leave some divine relics for the appraiser before the auction. The guard apologizes, saying the appraiser is with someone at the moment. The Aquarius Saint wonders how he dares to serve another client while she's there, and says she'll wait. People wonder who the hell is in there. It's the 13th Awakened inside. He's looking around and asks if the one managing this place is really SS rank, and says the price matches that level too. The appraiser asks who made this. The protagonist replies it was himself. The appraiser asks if he really did it and if he has any connection with Lee. Sung says he's a gum candidate. Jin says they're having an important conversation and to wait a bit and asks what his relationship is with the 13th Awakened. He asks why. Myung says most people don't know it since he's famous for his battles, but he's actually a legendary craftsman, and the relic he brought, he's seen countless fakes in his life, but this one is different, and it feels like Lee himself worked on it. The protagonist says he must know a lot about him. The appraiser says, of course, he's the disciple who received his blessing. Gun doesn't quite get it and asks what he means, and thinks he doesn't remember ever having a student. Jin says that considering his age, there's no way he's a direct student, but his skills are impressive and he was almost fooled. The 13th Awakened wonders if he should just punch that bastard in the face. Myung says now it makes sense. This is the item he received after being acknowledged by Lee as his disciple. The protagonist looks and wonders if that's the notebook he lost, and if this guy is the rookie who followed him in China. He thinks the guy was being really annoying, so he figured he was just being a nuisance. The appraiser says he had an incredible eye for items. He even gave him such useful information. But one day, he suddenly left all his belongings behind, and that notebook too. Lee thinks he thought he had lost it, but it was this bastard who stole it. Jin says his handwriting is really bad, so he couldn't read anything, but this must be the notebook where he wrote down ideas. And receiving something that precious. Gun thinks that was his target list. And ever since his awakening, he can get information on anyone he hits. So since this guy is an SS rank appraiser, he should yield some good intel. Myung hands over the notebook and says that this notebook will probably be more useful to a talented young man like him. The 13th Awakened thinks that's nice. There were some drawings in there, and he was a little disappointed when he lost it. The system notifies that the dormant notebook is reacting to the owner's magical power, and the notebook will evolve into a divine relic as a result of Ophiuchus's magical power. The appraiser is surprised to see a divine relic that stores memories, and says it seems to have a power he's never seen in his life. Then someone enters saying something happened. Jin asks what's wrong, and the subordinate replies that the saint is outside. Myung asks why they're causing so much commotion just because of the saint. Meanwhile, outside, Sophie is standing still, wondering why these vulgar people are staring at her, and thinks that always happens whenever she goes out in public. Sung watches her and wonders if the saint only appears at official events, and that he heard it was already a big deal for her to even leave the church. Marty says waiting any longer is a waste of time and she'll go in and talk to him personally, thinking that appraiser has to buy the divine relics at a high price so they can have money for the auctions, and wonders how long he'll make them wait. The guard says there's still a customer inside. The Aquarius Saint wonders who the hell this customer is for him to be treated like that and thinks she'll take a look at his face. She enters and is surprised, staring at him intently and thinking he's a handsome man. She has to get closer. But then she sees a giant snake and is startled. Sophie falls to the floor and the subordinates ask if she's okay. Marty wonders what that was and about the magical power she just felt, thinking it was like thousands of snakes around her, and she needs to get out of there right now. She runs off. Jin asks why she's leaving when she just got here. The protagonist replies maybe she's sick, and the system notifies that a Zodiac affiliate approached Ophiuchus without fear, and his divine power has been enhanced by Ophiuchus's divine power. Current divine power is 35%. He wonders if this is different from magical power. More notifications say that divine power takes form as the power of gods, and it can steal divine power from gods and other people. And if divine power hits 0%, the Zodiac will lose power. And if that state lasts, they'll be weakened. Lee says he keeps gaining more and more things and asks if that girl who just entered was the saint. Myung asks if he doesn't recognize her face, even though she's in every headline, and says she's the Aquarius Saint, Sophie Marty. Asks if he seriously doesn't know her. Gunn says he was wondering what all that saint talk was and asks if that girl is really the saint. And he thinks that was a massive transformation. Not surprised he didn't recognize her. Her original form wasn't bad, but now she's even more beautiful. But even if she changed her face with plastic surgery, her rotten heart will never change. And if he had to divide the things he hates into fish, bones, worms, and trash, Sophie is a worm, not even someone he could call human. Her skincare routine is more important to her than other people's lives. The appraiser says he doesn't understand why they consider her the pinnacle of compassion and altruism when she's actually a cruel and selfish person. The 13th Awakened says so he knows a bit about her. Jin says it's all because she was Lee's doctor, and using that excuse, she tried to collect funds in his name. However, with the other saints getting involved, the government stepped in to manage everything. The protagonist wonders if those people tried to take his money. Myung says he was using her name so familiarly just now and asks if he knows her. Gunn replies there's no way she doesn't know him. They're old friends. Elsewhere, the subordinate asks if the saint is okay. Sophie remembers Lee asking if she really wanted to be eliminated and wonders why he had to come back now. That overwhelming magical power gave her chills, and she wonders if she's ever thought that ending it all would be better than dying naturally. She tells her subordinate to go back to the pawn shop and find out who that man was. The subordinate says understood and asks what they should do about the appraiser. Marty says no, she's changed her mind, eliminate all of them. The subordinate says Virgo loves that appraiser and they need to sell their items. The Aquarius Saint says she's ruining her mood by putting her in a bad situation. And that man, who brought back her trauma, they're both just insolent fools. She says she'll even use her divine relic and borrow God's power. The subordinate says using his power in a neutral zone is... Sophie interrupts and asks if she's saying she can't follow orders. The subordinate replies, that's not it, that the saint's will is the will of the gods. She kneels down with her hands open and says, the saint's will is the will of the heavens, and there's no way to defy the will of the 12 celestial beings who rule the world. Elsewhere, the protagonist asks about a water leak. In the Divine Relic Trade Complex, Central Zone, Sung is walking down the street when he notices something and wonders what it is, and why there's water when it's not even raining. He thinks the water feels weak, but he can sense some magic power until the water takes the shape of a hand. His drink cup falls to the ground and the water forms into a human shape. Jay wonders what's going on. He looks back and several people are confused too, asking if it's some kind of event. The Aquarius Saint watches and continues using her mirror clone ability, saying these are merely A-rank Templars. But if enough ants attack at once, even an elephant can fall. Sung calls for security and asks why she's using a combat skill in a neutral zone and orders her to cancel it immediately. The subordinate says this was all ordered by the saint and to stop complaining, it's the will of the gods. She activates the relic and Jay shouts, no. An extremely bright light is emitted. Security uses the skill calling the forgetting chalice of water, summoning multiple water creatures. She says that from now on, she'll take care of the man inside the appraiser's building, and while she's at it, they should capture the appraisers. Multiple waves of water are launched at Jung. He's stunned and mutters to himself that he needs to get out fast before he loses consciousness, no matter what it takes. He tries to find a way out. Meanwhile, in another place, the protagonist is looking up at the ceiling. There's a large puddle. He watches it. The appraiser asks if something's going on outside because he can sense a strange, magical power. Then water restrains him. Someone puts a dagger to Lee's neck, telling him not to move, that it's nothing personal, but the saint is annoyed with him, and that he shouldn't try anything if he wants to avoid spilling vital fluids. The saint ordered both of them eliminated, but if he wants to apologize for disrespecting her and buy the relic at a high price, maybe she'll go easy on him. The appraiser lowers his head. Then a voice says, it's strange to see someone so bold with a knife in public these days. Jin looks surprised. Gun easily breaks the dagger in her hand and says he never even thought about using weapons in public. He tells the appraiser to charge them for damages. Myung notices the dagger was a gift from Aquarius and wonders how he broke it with his bare hands. The guard becomes irritated and says she thought she told him not to move. She summons more water to attack. The 13th awakened punches through the wave. He asks if there's more because that felt great. The subordinate thinks this makes no sense. He got rid of her A-rank clone with a single move, and it's just as the saint said she felt. This man is dangerous and must be eliminated before he causes trouble for the saint. She says she'll see if he can stop this. What she's about to use was created from the saint's highest purity magic. She uses an orange-rank summoning skill, Water Wolf. The protagonist says they're treating him so well just because it's been a while. Anne tells the appraiser to look over there. He said to take what he liked, so he's going to take those 2 daggers over there. He moves quickly, heading toward his opponent and slashing her, saying this dagger is a good one. The system notifies, data received, chalice of water that calls forgetfulness. Lee says these pests are just like dogs, and it's because of the material. This dagger is above A rank. He was only planning to have his item appraised, but ended up striking gold. More notifications arrive. Data received, mirror fragment clone, data received, night type, doesn't need to sleep, obsession with praying, mental enhancement trait, strong grip, strength increased by 5%, and Throne of God experience increased. He says this is beautiful. Security can't believe the saint's summons were defeated so easily. She looks at him. Gun, smiling, asks if this could be the end. The subordinate thinks he's way above her level, and if she attacks, she'll lose her life. She runs away, saying, just wait. The 13th awakens smiles and says people who say, just wait, aren't that scary. The appraiser keeps watching him, and the protagonist asks if he's okay. Sung suddenly shows up and says just now, an Aquarius Templar attacked him out of nowhere and he barely escaped. Lee says they just finished the cleanup. Jay asks what happened there and if that magical power isn't from the saint's summons. Gun says it seems so, and if they send him things like that, they're basically asking to be used as crafting materials. He says it's best to leave before the next wave. Then someone says to wait a moment. Myung thinks that 20 years ago he followed Lee everywhere and watched his creations and clearly remembers how he gathered materials from enemies after battles. He says that demonic look and crazy fighting style. Could it be that he's Gun? The protagonist raises his finger and smiles. A tear rolls down the appraiser's cheek. Lee says he'll come back to collect the materials, so keep them safe. And he also has questions to ask. Jin thanks him and invites him to return anytime. Gun smiles and walks out the door. Sung asks why the saint is targeting him and wonders if something's bothering her. If he made her an enemy, the 13th Awakened says, just wait, he'll show them something fun soon. At Eden Cafe, the table is full of ice cream and sweets. The protagonist is eating and says this ice cream is amazing and that he can eat as much as he wants. Jay says it's fine by him and asks if he's okay with it himself, since this place is expensive. Lee remembers when security drops something and says it's all good. After looking at that thing, it'll help a lot. He can even use it like a card and store other gods' abilities. Sung says looking at it now, it seems like an Aquarius insignia and thinks it even works like a card, so they might have trouble because of it later. Gun says they'll figure that part out after they eat. Jay wonders if it's really okay to just sit and eat. Then Choi walks up, asking if he likes the ice cream there too. Sung recognizes the voice and turns, saying it's the Divine Captain. Hyuk asks if they mind if he sits there. The 13th Awakened wonders if that's the boss who is talking trash to the kid. The Divine Gemini sits down and says, it's a pleasure to meet him, introduces himself, and asks forgiveness, wondering if he's the one Sung mentioned earlier. The protagonist replies yes and asks why. Choi says he heard he met someone who defeated the Spider Queen that Yang failed to kill. Gun asks what that has to do with him. Hyuk replies that recruiting outstanding talents is also part of a Divine Captain's job. The 13th Awakened asks about this recruiting and what he'll be subordinated to. The Divine Gemini says one of Lee's 8 divine relics will be auctioned soon and there's no rush, and asks what he thinks about discussing it while managing the auction. The protagonist places the spoon on the table and wonders if they're going to auction off his belongings. He says he has nothing to lose and will go with him, asks if the auction house is nearby. Jay thinks he should wipe the ice cream off his mouth first. Choi replies that unfortunately, it's not. Since it's one of the famous relics, it'll be auctioned in a proper place. The world's largest auction house soaring 16,000 feet in the sky. The wealthy fortress city, Drachma. In Drachma, the grand auction. The Aquarius saint is sitting in her chair, visibly nervous and trembling. Someone calls out to her. It's the Leo saint, asking if she's just going to sit trembling in the corner and tells her to leave because she's making the alcohol taste bad. Sophie thinks this man will never learn manners and that he's a real brainless brute, but she'll have to tolerate him for now. This is the man who rose even above Lee, and there's no safer place than by his side. Steven says that Lee's weapon being auctioned is his, and not to even think about bidding on it. He walks away and Marty asks where he's going. He replies that it's none of her business, and to just sit tight and wait. The Aquarius saint stays quiet and decides it's best to remain calm, thinking that this is Drachma, and whoever that man is, there's no way he'd come here. Until she notices something and wonders if that's Hugo. She thinks it's a good time for a valuable client to show up. Meanwhile, the Sagittarius saint is wondering where Gun disappeared to, thinking he expected him to show up with so many rare and expensive divine relics around. Sophie approaches him, calling him a stranger and asking how he's been. Otters recognizes her. Marty says it's rare to see him, and jokes that even he couldn't beat time. He was the pretty face of the saints for a while, but he's changed a lot. She asks if maybe it's because, unlike them, he has so few disciples. Hugo tells her to go away and says he doesn't want to talk to her. The Aquarius saint asks if he's going to ignore her and do as he pleases again, warning that if he does, he could lose his children just like he lost his wife. Sophie laughs and says she's not done yet. She might be doing just fine, and asks what he's supposed to do when the family is falling apart because of an incompetent leader. The Sagittarius saint releases mana and strikes, destroying the space in front of him, saying he already told her to leave. Marty puts a hand over her mouth and tells him to calm down. He must have forgotten the truce they agreed on 10 years ago. She activates her skill and asks if he shouldn't be more aware of his status as a half-saint, until someone calls her a pest. The Aquarius saint turns and finds Lee attacking her. Startled, Sophie falls to the ground. Hugo sees and realizes it's his friend. The protagonist asks what he's doing there. Otter says he was worried about him, afraid he'd end up in another mess. Gun asks if he was worried about him, and if he really likes him. The Sagittarius saint tells him not to joke about that. The 13th Awakened says to forget it and asks why this girl is everywhere he goes. Lee Gun is the 13th saint once considered the strongest. Sophie always hated him. In truth, she feared him. His terrifying scarred face, aggressive personality that spared no one, and those cold eyes that always looked down on her. 20 years ago on an ordinary day, the guards yelled at the protagonist to stop. A subordinate shouted that this was Aquarius's sanctuary and to leave immediately. Light flashed through the window. Lee quickly approached her and told her to screw off until he heard someone ask what the meaning of this was. It was the Aquarius Saint demanding to know how he dared invade this place and ordering him to leave. Gunn punched the wall behind her, glared at her, and asked if she truly wanted to lose her life. Sophie asked why he was doing this. The 13th Awakened asked if she was seriously asking that, and reminded her he sent her to the rear lines to treat the wounded from the calamities? So what was she doing there? He said it looked like the arms and legs of those people had been severed, all because they got hurt while protecting her. He grabbed her by the arm and told her she was the one who said she'd take care of them, so go save them now. Marty ordered him to let her go and asked who cares if people like them die. She said they should be happy to sacrifice themselves for the good of humanity, and asked if he was belittling the saints. She said they were already dealing with tons of crap lately because people were calling them useless, and they had no intention of dealing with any more of it. The protagonist looked at her, and the Aquarius Saint said if he understood, he should leave. She had to do her makeup for an interview. She pulled her arm back, telling him to let go and asking how tightly he was gripping her. Lee slapped her across the face and said he waited too long hoping a worm would understand human speech. A worm needs to be hit to understand how things work. In the end, Sophie was dragged over to treat the wounded until she fainted. She considered Lee a rude, irrational man and truly hated him. Gunn stands before her saying she makes a lot of noise while sleeping. Marty is tied to a chair, face to face with the man she despises, and starts screaming, asking what he's doing and demanding to be released, outraged that he dared do this to a saint. The 13th Awakened says she hasn't changed at all in the last 20 years and asks how she still keeps saying the same things. Sophie wonders if he really thinks things will stay like this and tells him not to assume things are the same as 20 years ago. She thinks about secreting acid fluid from her hands to melt the rope tying her down. A restriction like this is useless against her, and if she could escape and meet up with Steven, the protagonist hits her and says her tricks are easy to see through from her expressions, asking what she's trying to pull. Marty says he's stupid. She has an acid protection skill that activates when someone strikes her body. Now the acid magic will begin to melt his entire body, starting from the hand. And this is Aquarius's strongest defensive ability. Lee asks, "Oh yeah? So this is your strongest?" "Screw you." The Aquarius Saint asked what the hell is happening, realizing that the melted part was instantly healed. That's not recovery, that's a stolen ability. Gunn tells her to reminisce about everything that happened between them and says he heard she's been going around telling people she was his doctor. Then, flick. He asks if she's the one who sent Goon to the appraisal shop. 5 more flicks. Then he asks what kind of crap she was saying to Tack earlier. 50 more flicks. She says, "Wait." The 13th Awakened asks, "Wait?" He stares at her and thinks, the waiting is over. Sophie starts screaming and begging him to stop. Hugo watches and thinks his friend hits everyone the same, man or woman. And honestly, they all gave him reasons. He wonders if he's just imagining it, but it feels like his divine status is increasing with each flick, and wonders, which god's divine status is he raising? Until the protagonist steps back and realizes she fainted. The system notifies divine status unlocked, current divine status, 50% charge required. He doesn't really get what that means and asks for an explanation again. More notifications arrive. Divine status is the power of the gods, meant to manifest and maintain a god's might, and can be stolen from disciples of other gods. When divine status reaches 0%, the corresponding zodiac loses its power, which may result in elimination if it remains at 0%. Lee realizes he can also gain divine status by hitting people, and he didn't get divine status from hitting Yang because this hadn't been unlocked yet. Either way, it seems he can get even stronger. Otters asks if he shouldn't take the dagger from her too. Gunn replies she wouldn't dare strike him. Besides, he's already found someone who can investigate the dagger, so it's fine. The Sagittarius Saint realizes he just wanted to torment her anyway. The 13th Awakened puts a hand in his pocket, pulls out a cell phone, and says, "It's been a while." Hugo asks where he got the phone. He replies that he borrowed it from someone he knows and says he needs to head to the auction house now. He's leaving her there, and she can just be thrown into any trash can around. He'll get in touch after the auction's over. Otters wonders what he should do with her until someone opens the door. He asks if something was forgotten. Then his expression changes, and he thinks, of all people, why him? Steven looks at her tied to the chair, then at him, and asks what they were doing there, saying they're not in a situation where friendly greetings are appropriate. The Sagittarius Saint asks why he's here. The Leo Saint replies that Aquarius asked for an alliance, and he happened to have business in Drachma, so he came. And now it's his turn to ask questions. Why is he here? Hugo says he came for business at the auction house, but that's none of his concern. Marker asks if he's also after the divine relics of Lee being auctioned here. Otters asks if Gunn's divine relics are in this auction house. Steven asks if he seriously didn't know, and says the prices are probably way beyond what he could even dream of affording, so it makes sense he didn't know. The Sagittarius Saint smiles and asks if he's still collecting the divine relics Lee creates. Because all this time, he's never acknowledged his strength, always felt inferior to him, but still collects everything he makes. He asks if he's hoping that by doing so, he can become as strong as Lee. The Leo Saint causes an explosion right then and there. Hugo gets into a battle stance thinking just as expected. He loses it whenever someone mentions gun. Marker, furious, attacks with his skill, shouting and telling him not to be so arrogant. He grabs the Sagittarius Saint's arm and says he's nothing but a brainless weakling and to never talk about gun in front of him again because he's stronger than him now. Just then, someone shows up calling him, saying they've got a problem. The damned Geminis are buying up all the items. The Leo Saint says it looks like he doesn't have any more time to waste on him and tells him to do whatever he wants with Aquarius. Hugo asks if he wasn't going to take her with him. He replies that the auction is his priority and he's leaving. Besides, they're rivals when it comes to who has more disciples, so there's no need to take care of her that far. And this is a bit of advice from his former comrade. If he wants to stay alive, he should control his personality and lower his head. Otter says he's so touched he might cry. He keeps watching, then lowers his head and looks at his injured hand, thinking this is why he's not good enough. At the Drachma auction house in a VIP room, someone says twins, and that the divine relics also belong to them this time. With that, the first auction session ended, and after a brief break, the second session began. The protagonist says it's his again. Choi congratulates him and says he can buy as much as he wants. Lee thanks him and says he not only invited himself into the VIP room, but is also letting himself buy whatever he wants. The bishop of the twins says that's natural since they want talent like him. Sung asks if everything is really okay and says it seems the total of these divine relics will surpass billions of won. Hyuk says he's calm and, more importantly, apologizes and asks if he could cover the alcohol bill since he didn't bring any corporate card. Jay thinks he's already borrowed a lot of money but can't say anything because he's his superior. Gun says not to worry about it and that he already paid for everything. The bishop wonders if that's his unlimited card. The 13th Awakened says he seems a bit drunk and already paid in advance and shouldn't make his subordinates pay, even if by mistake. Choi says he was about to give him his personal card and thanks him for helping pay with it, thinking he looks young but is trying to get into his mind. However, this is the super rookie who eliminated the Queen Spider, and if used properly, no matter the amount, it won't mean anything. And since they drank a lot, he asks if they should talk about the main topic. He says he thinks very highly of him and is sure he has the potential to be rank S or higher, and also wonders if he obtained the blessings of their saint. The protagonist thinks the dominating mist, which others can't see, doesn't force anyone to do anything but is a magic that makes someone trust him more just by breathing a little of it. Choi says the saint's successor could become one of the 10 saints, and that's not all. He would have wealth and honor and also possess the strong authority of the great mage Saint Ares, all for free. He extends his hand and says to shake it and become one of his disciples of the great Ares. Lee starts laughing and says, "It's been so funny today," and to sum up, asks if it's something like asking to become an employee of a mere divine entity. Hyuk thinks he was being so kind earlier and wonders why he's getting angry out of nowhere. So he needs to change the subject first and says he thinks he's mistaken about something. Then someone approaches, apologizing for the inconvenience, and says they brought the auction items that were bought. The bishop thinks it's a great time and says to come in. The attendant says yes and asks to be excused. She opens the door and congratulates him, saying this is the item bought at auction and the certificate of authenticity, proving it's a divine relic of Lee. He replies that he understands and thinks the certificate of authenticity. Surely they know how to fool others. The bishop asks if he happened to buy the divine relic. Gunn answers that he said to buy whatever he wanted and wasn't specifically looking for that, but it's a very useful relic. Choi thinks Steven is obsessed with divine relics, so they shouldn't provoke him by buying one, and says, sorry, but that relic already has another owner, so they would like to refund. Then someone attacks, breaking the door. They look, and the Lion Saint asks who it is and who dared to lay hands on his items. The protagonist asks if he is the one who said he wanted his relic. The Divine Gemini apologizes and says the newcomer made a mistake by not knowing much and will return it to him immediately. The Lion Saint asks if that's it, says it's fine, and he just needs to admit it and give it back. Choi thanks him and says he can take his time with payment. Marker smiles and says it's a pity he doesn't have to spend a single cent, and if he didn't think he could get away with it after putting his hands on what's his. Hyuk wonders if he's planning to save billions using a mistake as an excuse. Lee tells him to stop talking nonsense and says he won and asks why it would be his, saying if he wants he can sell it to him for 200 billion. Gunn looks at him and laughs, saying it seems the twins are not full of cowards and even have a pretty brave one. Choi wonders if this kid wants to get himself eliminated and if he doesn't know who that guy is. The Lion Saint pushes the bishop aside and says He likes him. A man needs at least that much courage. And if they meet like this, it must be destiny, and asks what he thinks about introducing themselves. He says whenever he meets someone he likes, he introduces himself kindly, and it will be full of sparks. Gun asks what the hell he's talking about and thinks that Bastard's skills have improved a bit. As expected from the lion specialized in combat, his fighting spirit cannot be compared to Ares or Aquarius. Once he shows his claws, he won't be satisfied until he tears someone apart. He has a fierce temperament. Steven extends his hand toward him, emitting a strong light. Sung looks frightened. Choi thinks he's really going to destroy him. The Lion Saint says it was quite fun and that he can spend the rest of his life comfortably in a wheelchair. The 13th Awakened asks what he's doing and if he's brushing dirt off his shoulder. Marker wonders what that was since that ability was definitely a direct hit. He asks if he redirected his attack with teleportation. The protagonist asks if he can't see and says it seems he's all muscle and little brain. Stone wall breaking ability. He asks if he thinks the ability he created himself would work on him. He says he begged to be taught, saying he'd only use it to save people, but it seems he's just using it to show off power. Steven asks who he is. The auction announcer thanks everyone for waiting and says the main highlights of the auction will start in a few moments. The Lion Saint asks if it's time already, and Lee wonders if it's another one of his relics. Marker says he has many questions, but that this auction is very important to him and asks that the pendant be well cared for because he'll come back when the auction is over. Jay asks if he's okay. Choi wonders how he dodged that attack. Redirecting a rank Saint attack is impossible, even for himself, and wonders who the hell this guy is. The auction announcer says the moment has arrived. The auction highlights have revealed the divine relic everyone was waiting for. She asks if everyone remembers the Berlin Wolf incident 24 years ago and says it was about an unknown calamity appearing on an island in Germany. It was complete pandemonium that completely melted all weapons and armor. At that time, even the 20 saints couldn't cleanse it, so all attempts to subjugate the calamity went down the drain. Then the hero Lee appeared and defeated the calamity, and now they reveal the relic Gun used to defeat it. The Lion Saint thinks it's finally within reach. It was an incident about an unknown calamity appearing on an island in Germany about 20 years ago. A helicopter was flying overhead. A reporter was being recorded saying they were currently above the island where the calamity appeared, and although 4 days have passed since the 13th Awakened entered, they haven't been able to confirm what's happening inside since he hasn't come out. Although several saints tried to go inside, they had no room to maneuver due to the strong poison around the island and would return with more news as soon as there was any update. Someone says this is as far as they got. Steven wondered how Gun got into that place and how that bastard is fighting since they couldn't even enter, and why he has to feel this way because of a bastard who almost lost his life without the divine blessing of God, and what's the difference between the two? Is it power, subordinates, skills, or what is he missing? Until his subordinate calls him and says Gun is leaving the entrance. Marker looks surprised. Everyone around is also surprised and starts saying Lee returned alive and succeeded in defeating the calamity everyone thought was impossible to defeat. The hero returned. The subordinate mutters that it seems all the achievements were stolen by him again. The Lion Saint laughs and says now he understands. The subordinate doesn't understand much, and Steven says to prepare for withdrawal. The subordinate asks if he's taking the weapon. He replies he doesn't need to, and that he can keep it since he'll find something even better. Marker thinks that's it, what he was missing compared to Lee, and that's a weapon. In the present time, the announcer says one of Gun's 8 great relics, the strongest relic ever used in the Berlin Wolf, is revealed. Everyone watches attentively, and the protagonist doesn't understand, but Steven thinks it's just as he imagined, that's it. And he finally got to see again Lee's relic, the thing that will make him stronger. Elsewhere, a creature is summoned on top of a castle saying it can feel Gun's relic. Meanwhile, at the auction, they're about to reveal the strongest bone club, the Great Bone. People are surprised, saying to think they'd get to see it since they only heard of it in history books. The announcer says this is the greatest divine artifact both historically and in terms of use, and asks who will be the owner of the Great Bone. Sung screams saying he can't believe the divine artifact will fall into the hands of some trash. Choi asks if there's nothing they can do but watch it be taken from them by the lion. The 13th Awakened thinks he was wondering what it would be, and it really is something he used before, but that. He tries to grab it for his colleague beside him, and Jay says he's busy now and tells the sanctuary captain to do something. Hyuk says he'll talk to the sanctuary general right now because they can't let it be taken like this. The announcer says the auction for this item will begin, starting bid $1 million. People start bidding $5 million, $10 million, $30 million, and $50 million. The protagonist starts receiving multiple system notifications as his fame rises among other things, and he wonders why people are spending so much money on that thing. Sung, irritated, answers that obviously it's because it's a legendary weapon personally made by Gun, and they might not know, but there's a reason people do this. Ornaments, amulets, tools, weapons, and fragments. Each of these divine relics will do everything possible to get their hands on them, especially the Lion Saint, who is a serious case and has been collecting Lee's divine relics all over the world. This guy has overwhelming strength for a saint, so people try not to mess with him when it comes to divine relics. And it's a shame that Gunn's divine relics ended up just as part of Steven's collection. He tries to calm down since all profits go to the government-managed bank account. The 13th Awakened wonders about profits going to his account, regardless of who buys, thinks that's great, and imagines himself with lots of money, until Marker shouts very loudly, 1 billion! Everyone is stunned. The Lion Saint descends the stairs and asks if they didn't hear him, saying he'll buy it for $1 billion, and if that's not enough, he can buy it for $10 billion. The announcer is shocked hearing $1 billion and says an overwhelming bid was made for $1 billion and asks if anyone would like to make a higher offer. She repeats and asks again, then slams the hammer on the table saying it's sold. The Great Bone was sold for an unbelievable $1 billion. Meanwhile, staff walk down the corridor commenting on it, having been sold for $1 billion, saying it's not an amount you can just throw around, and people like them can't even dream of such a value, hoping someone will come and take down that guy. Then they notice something and look to the side, scared, and say they take back what they said. Inside the room, Steven is holding the artifact and the announcer congratulates him, saying he has become the new owner of the Great Bone. People start shouting his name and she says with this he has taken another huge leap. Then a big attack happens. The Lion Saint asks what's going on. People start running, saying it's a calamity. The creature says it found it. She looks and says it's Lee's divine relic. The creature opens its huge mouth, causing strong winds. Marker stares and activates his ability, attacking it, causing big impacts, laughing and saying this is the first time he's grateful to a calamity because it allowed him to experience the power of this divine artifact immediately. Until he notices the tower is also hit. People inside watch through the glass and Sung says this is bad and that the teleportation zone's magic tower is collapsing. The attack continues. People look desperate and say if all those debris hit the ground, the floating island will fall. The leader tells his disciples to unite their forces to block it. Another team says they'll help too. They start releasing mana, everyone there, causing intense mana and firing it toward the tower. They say it won't work because it's very big, and at this rate, they won't be able to destroy it. Stones start falling toward them and they say to run, until Apollo uses his fury, emitting flames. People say it's unbelievable they turn to ashes in an instant, and that ability belongs to the Sagittarius Saint. He thinks that idiot lion needs to learn to control his strength. People start thanking him for being saved, thanks to him. Then an explosion happens and another creature approaches, also a calamity. Hugo wonders if there was one more. The creature releases acid from its mouth, emitting it toward the people at the location, touching and trapping them. People become desperate, begging for help. Otters calls it a bastard and asks how it dares. A loud sound is emitted. He looks back and it's the other calamity, about to swallow him. But the beast is attacked. The Sagittarius Saint realizes it's his friend. The protagonist calls to him and tells him to pay attention. Hugo thanks him for saving him. Lee asks if he shouldn't be a combat saint, and how the hell he is weaker than a production saint like himself, and says he's nervous about having to leave him alone. Otter says he tried his best. Gunn asks if that's why he was almost eliminated by a calamity. Then someone shouts, it's the Lion Saint holding the bone, calling them bastards and telling them not to get involved because he's testing his new weapon. Then the beast next to him emits a loud sound too. The 13th Awakened says he forgot that thing was there as well. Then he notices a light. It's Steven heading toward the beast, telling them not to interfere with the stage, preparing both the Great Bone and himself. The protagonist asks why his pants look like that. Marker tells them to stop being a pain and disappear once and for all. He uses the sovereign skill, Battlefield of the Victors, and says to wait there, inside an unbreakable thunderstorm. Now the stage is set. Previously, he was in a bad position, so he had to counterattack using his magic power. But now, he wants to show the true power of the Great Bone. People say he is the strongest saint, surpassing even Lee, and that they are saved and should finish off the beast. The Lion Saint says now it's time for him to pay for causing all this chaos. He raises the weapon and tells them to prepare, but when he strikes, he can't even scratch it. Steven quickly changes his expression, and the people cheering for him feel embarrassed. Marker stares at the beast for a while. The monster stares back, turning its head sideways. The Lion Saint shouts and attacks the beast in every way, but it remains intact and hits him, knocking him down. Steven, while falling, finds it strange and thinks those should have been direct hits, wondering why his weapon isn't working, and asks what they think, if they think they can get out of this, and says they can't. After all, this is a sovereign skill, so it can't be easily nullified. The protagonist says he swears that when they get out of there, he won't go easy on him. Hugo calls him an idiot lion and asks who would have thought he'd use his own sovereign skill like that. Lee says first of all, they will finish off those guys there, and asks if those mobs are part of the calamity. The attacked people have terrified faces, and the Sagittarius Saint says no, they are people who fell under the calamity's skill, and judging by how the calamity is in front of them, he thinks it intends to use them as hostages, so they can't just attack it recklessly. People walk toward them, and Gunn says he thinks they have no choice but to aim for the head. Otters asks how and if he has a plan. The 13th Awakened answers no and says to just attack immediately. Hugo says to wait a moment and warns him there's one in front and to look ahead. The protagonist grabs it, smiles menacingly, and pulls, defeating it. The Sagittarius Saint is left speechless. The Calamity watches closely, and Lee asks if he saw and says it's simple. Otters asks if he's okay. Gunn replies yes, just unconscious for now. Hugo asks how he did that. The 13th Awakened says it was with force. The Sagittarius Saint says then he won't succeed. The protagonist asks what he's talking about and says he'll finish them all anyway. Otters says he doesn't even try to go easy. And anyway, while his friend advances, he'll provide cover. Lee says then he still knows how it's done and hopes he can keep up, and instead of wasting time, they'll finish this quickly. The monsters and attacked people watch. Gunn runs toward them, releasing his skill and hitting them, removing their acid. The Calamity emits a sound, opening its huge mouth. The 13th Awakened says it's nothing, but the acids don't hit him and pass through, and he wonders if it's aiming at civilians behind him. The acids approach civilians, but a great light is emitted, causing an explosion by Hugo, and he says not while he's here. The protagonist smiles and says good job, and tells the monster not to waste energy. The Calamity notices something. Lee, with clenched fists, strikes it, causing a great impact and huge explosion, destroying it in pieces. The Sagittarius Saint says it was as expected, finishing it instantly. Gunn says, of course, and the people controlled by that thing should return to normal soon. Then he notices something and looks at his hand with a light around it and asks what is happening. Several notifications arrive saying he tore a Calamity's energy with his own hands, and his divinity has increased and is charging. Current divinity, 81%, and divinity charge has exceeded 70%, asking if you want to use the divinity charge to activate Fighter's Instinct. Gunn realizes this is an ability that requires a certain level of divinity to use, thinks it's a good moment to test it, and accepts. Meanwhile, the Lion Saint stands with the bone in hand, facing his opponent. Thinking that to imagine things got to this point, he wonders why the Great Bone isn't working and whether he's truly unable to use its true power, or if it's weaker than that thing. People watch him and say he's being cornered until one tells them to wait and look over there. Huge lightning bolts are unleashed by the 13th Awakened. Marker asks how this is possible, and if his sovereign skill was destroyed. The Calamity says it's dangerous and that before the relic, they must eliminate him first. It moves toward the protagonist to swallow him. He tells it to shut up and attacks with his skill. People around struggle to hold on because of the strong wind, and the beast falls to the ground. On the brink of death, it asks how a human can have so much authority and wonders if he's really human. Lee asks what the hell she's saying there. He attacks her again. The Lion Saint watches and thinks it can't be, that only one guy ever had that much power, and that's him. Gunn interrupts, saying it's good to see him again, calls him bastard, and says he saw he was having a lot of fun while tarnishing his name around. Steven starts trembling and says it can't be, attacking, saying it can't be Lee. Then he notices something, sees the 13th Awakened blocked his attack effortlessly, and says it looks like he had a lot of fun playing with that. The protagonist breaks the bone with his bare hands and says sorry for breaking his expectations. That's just a normal big bone. Marker is outraged seeing the bone he bought at auction broken. Lee says it was so much effort for nothing, and it's only fair he now lands his blow. The Lion Saint says to wait, but Gunn doesn't hesitate and strikes him. With his great skill causing a huge explosion, Steven screams and calls him damned while falling from the island. Meanwhile, the Aquarius Saint lies on the ground and hears the scream, asking why she's sleeping there and says her head hurts. Outside, the protagonist looks at the hole his opponent fell into and starts laughing, saying, "See you later," and calls him bastard lion. Hugo asks what the hell he threw the opponent from that height for. Lee asks who cares and says all he has is a strong body. Somehow he'll survive. And the people caught are okay. The Sagittarius Saint replies, of course, and says to look how happy they all are. Gunn summons his piggy bank and says to collect everything useful, and there's one more person with him. They'll take them when they return. Otters asks who and if it's the person who lent the cell phone. The 13th Awakened answers yes and says he thinks his surname is Sung. Hugo, surprised, asks what. The protagonist repeats the boy's name and says it seems he's associated with Gemini. Considering this guy's magic power, he's strong enough to be at a bishop's level, young but still bright enough, so it's good to keep him nearby. Otters wonders if his son really got involved with that walking disaster and thinks he was taking extra care to keep him away from his kids. Those two are huge fans of their friend, so if they find out he's still alive, their family will fall into ruin. Lee says he was with a Gemini bishop who can use teleport magic, so if he calls them all, the Sagittarius saint interrupts, telling him to wait and leave quickly. Gunn asks why. Hugo answers he must be tired of those Gemini guys already, and asks why he still bothers to get involved with them. The 13th Awakened says now that he mentions it, he thinks they've been pestering him. Otters asks if he saw him and says he said so, and they don't like him. The 13th Awakened says he thought about keeping an eye on them, but thinks he should have expected that from the Gemini guys. Hugo says it's not worth paying attention to kids like that. Then, someone calls him Dad. He turns, and it's Jay asking if he might be talking about Lee. The Sagittarius saint, nervous, wonders what his son is doing there, and if he already answered the call. Sung tells him to tell the truth. Otters says he knows very well. An acid on the ground calls the 13th Awakened and rises, heading toward him. Lima moves quickly, opens his mouth, and swallows the acid. The system notifies the divine relic gained poison resistance. The scope of the 100 Poisons body skill has expanded. When creating a divine artifact, poison resistance will be imbued in it as a basic effect. The protagonist calls it a bastard and asks how hungry it must have been to eat some trash it found on the ground, telling it to spit that out quickly. The Sagittarius saint looks aside and wonders if that thing came from the bone calamity and thinks things could have become dangerous. Jay says that slime, he's sure he saw it in a book, was one of Lee's artifacts. The incredible ability Lee has shown so far and that raw magical power. The only person the saint's father's outcast is friends with, and that slime shaking asks if it's really Gun. His father looks desperate while Sung is quite excited. Meanwhile, the 13th Awakened is very irritated with his artifact and starts yelling. Later, in the United States, headquarters of the Lion Temple. In the Lion Executive's meeting room, the Lion Bishop says they still haven't found the Castellan since he disappeared. The Gemini guys are known for detection ability, so they can pay whatever they want to make them find the Castellan. One of the guys asks if he really thinks they'll do that after the mess he caused earlier, and says they heard the one who defeated the chief was Lee. Oliver asks if that might be true, and says even if it is, he was defeated once before, and actually, even among saints, their Castellan is the strongest. Then someone starts saying lions are trash, and the temple is trash, and loves Gun. The person repeats this several times. Everyone falls silent, looking in that direction. It's a girl. She apologizes and says she forgot to put it on vibrate. One of the disciples yells at her, and the bishop says this is a meeting aimed at finding their Castellan, and asks if she could take it more seriously. Cheon asks why they should look for that bastard. Everyone there is confused. Yuha apologizes and asks why they should look for him and says that guy has a strong body and will survive somehow. People wonder if that was really a mistake. The bishop says, as the Castellan's right hand and one of the cardinals, she should get involved and asks if she's listening. Meanwhile, the vice is distracted, fiddling with her cell phone, talking to her uncle who needs to know this now, saying she's leaving now, and they'll decide the rest there. Everyone watches her indignantly. Oliver starts trembling with anger and shouting. In Aquarius's sacred domain, at Sophie's residence, people ask for some comments and if it's true that yesterday's incident at Drachma is related to Lee, who kidnapped her, and what the truth from 20 years ago is. The guards say not today and tell them to move back because the saint needs to rest. The saint will respond to everything via official channels at a later date. Meanwhile, Marty looks pale by the window, irritated with Gun, calling him a bastard and wondering how he dares cause all this trouble. Before that, the guards told everyone to get out of the way because she needs to pass and to make space. People ask many questions about what's happening and say they heard the saint was kidnapped and then released. And these criminals are very bold. Then, a light quickly approaches her. People look and ask if it's a terrorist attack. The guards reply no. It's a message asking who eliminated Lee and says to reveal the truth from 20 years ago to everyone. In real time, Sophie is desperate, not knowing what to do, thinking if she reveals the truth, the other saints won't leave her alone. But if she does nothing, Gun won't leave her alone either, and wonders how he dared do something like that while she was unconscious. She starts screaming desperately, saying it's all his fault. Meanwhile, the protagonist sits on the ground with his piggy bank in his lap, saying maybe he'll make some ramen. On television, it's reported that until now the saint hasn't left her sacred domain and hasn't said anything. Among all the incidents after the Drachma incident, this one is expected to have the worst effect. A man watching says, this won't be enough. At the Sagittarius Saint's house, an arrow hits the target and someone says 10 points. Holding the bow, it's Hugo. The 13th Awakened asks what he thought of the new bow and if he liked it. Otters replies it's perfect and can't even be compared to what that goat did for him. The protagonist asks how he dares make that comparison. He hits the arrows on the target and says 10 points. The Sagittarius Saint calls him and asks if he really needs to shoot the bow like that. Lee, with his eyes covered, replies that shooting arrows is fun too. Hugo asks if he's doing it on purpose and says he didn't have to shoot at his target. Gunn removes the blindfold and smiles, saying he did it because it's fun to tease him. Then someone approaches with drinks. It's Sung calling him uncle and saying there's water and a towel. The 13th Awakened thanks him. Meanwhile, Otters is quite angry and asks if he can also get water for his father. Jay replies it's in the fridge and he can go get it. The protagonist says his attributes increased after what happened in Drachma, so he thinks he'll invest a little. The system notifies that the sacred domain of Ophiuchus, the father of the Serpent Palace, has been created. The level of his sacred domain is low, so the space is narrow. The sacred domain is the space where the Constellation Master lives and is a private territory where he can maintain and exert power. Now he is able to control the sacred domain and can teleport his low-class avatar, the piggy bank, into the sacred domain, and can strengthen the power of his sacred domain by bringing human avatars. Lee thinks thoughtfully about human avatars. Sung asks if he didn't say it was almost time to leave and says he also has things to settle and they can go together. He replies he hadn't noticed the time. Hugo asks if there's a meeting. Gunn answers yes and says he has many people to meet today. At Red Eye Studio, Choi says so he'll join Gemini. The 13th Awakened eats chicken and says it's as if he never gets tired and asks if he didn't say he was busy. Hyuk says he may be busy, but recruiting skilled people is always important, and besides, he doesn't plan to play innocent after buying items worth millions at the auction with Gemini's money. The protagonist keeps eating chicken and thinks he was going to do exactly that, and at first found this guy a bit annoying, but actually that's good. And Pest, Plague, and Lion, the next one to defeat is that purple witch bastard, and he says he'll join the Gemini sect. The Divine Gemini says to decide the official date. Lee interrupts, saying he has a condition. That badge he's wearing, he wants it. The guards insult him and say that badge was a personal gift from the saint to the bishop. Gunn tells them to stay out of it and calls them shit, saying he needs those badges to use all Gemini's privileges, and they can promise support later. But he's the type of person who only trusts promises when there's something in hand, and they can at least invest that in a skilled person. Choi says to give him time to think. The guards look confused, and the 13th Awakened says to decide quickly because there's another meeting after this. He talks to his nephew on the phone. Sung, holding the phone, thinks this place is also famous for gelato and hopes his uncle likes it. He's sure Nuna will be shocked to learn he's her uncle and will be surprised for the first time in a long while. When his uncle arrives, he'll ask him to autograph the dagger he gave him. Then someone approaches, takes his dagger, and says, "Playing with knives is dangerous." That's dangerous, so he'll confiscate it. Jay asks what that means. The boy who took the dagger is Gemini's Class A Templar, Yoon Siwoo. Sung asks what he's doing there and to please give it back. Yoon asks if that's how to speak. Jay thinks he's annoying because he's older and wishes he could beat him so he couldn't say anything, but can't mess with him because he's Libra's son, and acts important because he knows it. He says to return it and asks if he knows what it is. The boy's friends put him on the table, telling him to sit there. Sung says they should keep quiet in public places. They tell him to shut up. Jay asks if he really wants to do that. Siwoo says he talks too much for someone kept imprisoned and wonders what it is that makes him so irritated. Maybe something that Lee he admires made, or perhaps a gift from his disabled mother. Sung gets very angry and insults him. The system notifies that the Janus Wish relic reacts to the master in danger. A random skill activates. A great light emits from the relic. Yoon doesn't understand anything until he sees someone approaching and headbutting him. People around are very surprised and scared. The boy was attacked by the protagonist. Siwoo covers his mouth and screams. Jay is excited to see his uncle. Lee now realizes it's his nephew. Sung asks how he knew he should show up there now. Gunn answers he was at a fried chicken restaurant, and it seems the single-use summoning skill he put on the dagger was activated. But that means those bastards threatened him. He asks how they dare mess with his nephew, and says he'll have to show them what happens to anyone who messes with one of his. The boys get scared. At the fried chicken restaurant, just before the 13th Awakened was summoned, Choi says it's all right and will give him the badge and tells him to join them there and now. He thinks this is nothing to catch a big fish. And moreover, when he joins their sect, he can just get the badge back by putting a special clause in the contract. The Divine Gemini puts the badge in his hand and says not to go around using it carelessly. The protagonist replies he'll try. Hyuk says to go quickly. They accept him on the team. Then Lee, a light emits, and Lee disappears from the place. They watch, and Choi wonders if he just vanished after eating. Then the waiter arrives with the bill. Elsewhere, the boys lie sprawled over the table, and Gunn is still attacking. Yoon asks if he knows who he himself is, and says he is Class A of the Gemini Temple and super rich. The 13th Awakened keeps striking him, and Siwoo says he's the son of the Libra Saint. The protagonist still strikes him in various ways, and Yoon thinks he wants to hear what he has to say. Lee tells him to get up because he's just warming up. Siwoo, lying on the ground, thinks his magic defense isn't working and wonders what's going on. He slaps the table and calls him Worm, telling him not to be so arrogant. The boy activates his skill, summoning the Phalaris Bull. People say he used magic against someone in a civilian area and that they need to run or they'll get hit by it. Siwoo laughs and says that's what he gets for acting powerful. Gun releases his mana and says he's very noisy and wonders how amazing that skill could be, but it can't even light charcoal. More notifications arrive that he mastered his opponent's magic and obtained data on the Phalaris Bull. Yoon wonders how that's possible and asks if he's a mage. The 13th Awakened replies, no, that he's a blacksmith. More notifications say he can use the skill data he collected, which will be stored temporarily. The data will degrade based on use. To use a skill permanently, he needs to collect data and create a relic. It asks if he wants to use the data as a skill. The protagonist says he'll show how to use real fire. He uses his skill Masculine Flaming Passion and Phalaris Bull. Siwoo screams while being attacked, destroying everything around as he's thrown away. Lee says that if anyone messes with his nephew again, he'll turn them into kebabs. He tells his nephew that if he meets idiots like that, he doesn't need to be afraid because he'll be there to protect him. Then someone arrives, it's Cheon. She asks what happened there and says it's a mess. Sung, very excited, says that doesn't matter now because here is the hero who defeated countless calamities and saved humanity many times, the star of the videos they've seen since they were kids. Gun looks aside and smiles. Yuha is stunned with surprise and asks if he really is the 13th Awakened, unable to believe it because he looks very handsome. 20 years ago, he had many scars, and having spent 20 years inside the Devil's Tower, she thought he'd look even worse. What matters is not his external appearance, and she's happy he's well. Jay says she was thinking out loud. The protagonist asks if she is Yuha and says it's a pleasure to meet her. She introduces herself and thanks him for helping her brother. Lee says no need to be so formal, and she's Hugo's daughter, which means she's practically his niece. Her eyes fill with tears of emotion. Cheon apologizes for saying that right after meeting him and asks if she could ask a favor. He answers yes and tells her not to be shy. Yuha says if it's okay with him, could she Ruah. Gun doesn't understand much of what she just said until a giant calamity appears. Cheon quickly cuts it with her spear and says to wait a moment and that she'll ask for his hand right after eliminating those monsters. She runs toward the opponents and her brother says she got like that because of her uncle. Meanwhile, the 13th Awakened wants to know what she said she was going to ask. The sky begins to darken and noises are heard. The loudspeaker says calamities have appeared and this is not a drill, and tells people to evacuate to a safe area until a beast breaks the loudspeaker. Various flying monsters approach, destroying everything around but are struck by Yuha with her spear and skill. As she attacks, she thinks repeatedly that she needs to be faster because she wants to finish this quickly to talk to her uncle. But they don't stop being annoying, so she'll have to take them all out at once. She releases more intense mana, stomps the ground, and says not to interrupt her request. She activates her Flash Lotus skill, causing a huge explosion. The protagonist smiles, thinking he decided to keep an eye on her because he was worried, but it seems it wasn't necessary. Her combat senses are actually better than her father's. Cheon looks at him, but a beast is about to attack. Lee moves immediately to stop it. The girl is impressed, and a voice says it's amazing they managed to avoid that attack, that there really are impressive humans, and that it likes him and will make him its special pet. The calamity walks toward him. Gun asks why everyone is playing with fire these days and says it doesn't matter. He needs materials to make more relics anyway, and will turn it into his #1 fuel. The beast says he'll be a fun human to train. Yuha realizes those guys are of the illusory race and needs to catch them, until someone asks why she's so serious. It's Gun telling her to leave that to him and to ensure the civilians' safety. He's leaving it with them because he knows they're strong and can be trusted to handle it. Cheon smiles and the two siblings reply they understand. They activate their skills, and the 13th Awakened asks why they won't have a little fun. The calamity moves, trying to hit him in many ways, but the protagonist dodges all attacks. The beast says to suffer even more. It traps him and says it will be even more fun to train him. It moves the rope binding him in all directions while laughing loudly, causing a huge impact. Lee, still tied up, breaks the ropes and says she talks too much and does nothing, asking if that's all she has. The monster smiles and replies, of course not. It releases many flames, causing a huge explosion. Meanwhile, Sung is holding things falling to the ground, telling people to run to the evacuation center, and thinks it's amazing he managed to get everyone out too, telling his sister that she evacuated all the remaining civilians. She agrees and watches her uncle's fight attentively, thinking he's definitely strong, but he's facing the illusory race, one of the most dangerous calamities. She thinks it must be at least red class, so even her uncle will have difficulties and wonders if he still has wounds or side effects from the Devil's Tower and says if that's the case, she needs to help him. Her brother shouts that uncle said to stay away. Cheon says she'll be right back and tells him to hide. Meanwhile, the Calamity asks if it pressured him too much and says it didn't want to reduce him to ashes. The protagonist starts laughing and says that's what he's talking about. Fire has to be at least that hot, and that Gemini crap fire was so boring. He smiles and calls it number one fuel and chooses it to be the creation fire. The system notifies that usable fire has been obtained in the creation workshop. The Calamity wonders if he survived that hellfire. Lee says now he has fire and doesn't need to hesitate. He summons the creation hammer, and more notifications arrive that usable fire in the creation workshop was detected. Repairs, enhancements, initial attribute upgrades, and luck are being applied, and he can choose the enhancement target. He says the enhancement target is this one. The beast says it doesn't know what's happening but seems to allow it. Yuha appears behind the beast, activating Lightning Roar skill, but notices something. The monster blocks her attack and asks how she dares. The Calamity throws her away. Cheon is severely injured. The beast tells its partner that she's his snack and that he can eat her. The monster runs toward the girl, but Gun steps in front of him and asks where he's going since he has to play with him. The 13th Awakened throws him away. The lizard opens its huge mouth. The Calamity asks if he grabbed and threw the hell lizard with his own hands. The protagonist says that if anyone messes with his niece again, he'll wipe out his entire race. He summons his snake. The Calamity, startled, asks what that is, and says it's swallowing her and wonders if she's being swallowed, a member of the great illusory race, by a mere human. It releases intense mana and says it understands now and will stop playing. Yuha wonders what magical power that is. The Calamity says it doesn't like this form since it can't train like this, but seems it must recognize him as an enemy. Her appearance becomes different and darker, and she says she will burn him and the whole area until nothing but ashes remain. Then she activates her Hell Prison skill, causing a huge explosion. Cheon screams for her uncle. Extremely intense lights are emitted until the Calamity looks and its attack is blocked. Lee says this is more useful than he thought. He uses plastic gloves to touch fire, has fire resistance, random luck +1 resistance, and when eating something spicy, durability lowers and it's single use. The Calamity says this is hell and asks if he stopped her hell prison with plastic gloves. The system activates super regeneration. Gun grins sinisterly and says he will make her pay for setting the whole city on fire, forcing her to keep the fire in his workshop burning forever. The Calamity says it's a humiliation. The 13th Awakened laughs and asks how it's a humiliation, if she's underestimating those plastic gloves, and if she doesn't know how convenient they are for eating fire chicken. More notifications arrive saying the negative energy is too strong to transform infernal wings into an Ophiuchus avatar. Purification is necessary. The protagonist asks about purification, and if that's what it means, activating Purifying Punch. The Calamity says to wait, but he doesn't hesitate and attacks with Purifying Punch, asking why it's so hard to purify her. The system notifies the target was finished, and finished targets cannot be purified. Lee asks if she didn't even resist that and says he thinks he has no choice, and since his gas burner broke, he'll have to use it. The infernal lizard Calamity surrenders and becomes an Ophiuchus captive. Gun asks what name he wants, giving options like Torch, Gas Cylinder, Lantern, Little Coal, or Lala Lizard. The infernal lizard chooses Torch. Cheon asks if everything is okay there. The 13th Awakened asks if the two siblings are okay. Yuha replies they're fine and says, anyway, there's something she needs to tell him and will ask for his hand right after eliminating these calamities. The protagonist is shocked and says it happens that she interrupts and asks if he didn't really sacrifice himself in the Devil's Tower and says she always wondered about that. She says other saints said he sacrificed himself for humanity's sake, but it was strange that against the Red Eye, who almost massacred all humanity, only he, the strongest of saints, lost his life. But since there was no evidence, and they couldn't investigate the incident, she had to keep her suspicions quiet, but after seeing his strength today, she's sure he didn't sacrifice himself but actually became prey to someone's evil plans. Lee looks at her and says, as expected from his friend's daughter, she's smart and that's exactly what happened. 20 years ago, he was betrayed inside the Devil's Tower by one of the 12 saints who went to eliminate the Red Eye. The brothers ask how that can be and say they don't understand, asking if the saints didn't want to save the world with him. Sung says he was the hope of the world and asks how they could do that to the greatest hero. Gun replies that's probably the reason, because he was better than them, because he defeated the Red Eye alone, and that's probably why they tried to eliminate him. With the Calamity Chief finished, they could rule the world as they wanted, and the greatest obstacle between them and these ambitions was himself. And honestly, he's not even sure, and this is just a hypothesis. Jay says it's horrible, and that means he was trapped in the tower alone, and besides, the other saints stole his honor when in fact he saved humanity. The 13th Awakened smiles and thanks them, saying they don't need to cry and that he'll make them pay 1,000,000 times more for what they did. He takes his cell phone and says this is the last thing on his agenda today. Elsewhere, with many people sitting and some filming, they comment that the truth from 20 years ago is being revealed and ask what the saint means by going there to hold a press conference in Korea. The guy next to them replies it probably has something to do with the mysterious drachma message, or maybe recent rumors about Lee's survival, and one thing's certain, the saint is going to reveal something grand today. The Aquarius saint is being filmed by many people, sweating nervously, thinking she's doomed, and wonders if she should send this press conference to hell and run away. She thinks better not, as she has a relic right now around her neck, and wonders who knows what that damned relic will do. She thinks if she wants to live, she'll have to do what he says and doesn't know about the other saints. But Gun wasn't bluffing when he said he'd get rid of her. She is very nervous and begins to say that the reason she is there today is what they all suspect, to reveal the truth about the incident from 20 years ago, and asks if everyone there remembers the incident that happened in the Devil's Tower at that time. They realize it's about the Devil's Tower, and ask if it's not about the Red Eye raid, and if it wasn't completed by the 12 saints, and say that's why they are still hailed as heroes today. Sophie says, to tell the truth, and that on that day, the real hero who defeated the Red Eye, she closes her eyes and finishes by saying it was Lee. They respond that they understand and take notes until they widen their eyes and ask what that is. They stand up and ask if what he's saying is true. Was it really Lee who defeated the Red Eye? Wasn't it Steven who took it down? They demand to know the details and ask if the saints have been lying for the past 20 years. If everything was just a lie told by the saints, then that means Gun is still alive. Marty looks irritated until a man appears and says, of course, that's impossible. The Aquarius saint looks shocked to see the Cancer saint. He tells her she looks pale and doesn't think she's in any condition to continue this press conference, asking her directly if he's wrong. Sophie, trembling, says that he's right. Jean interrupts, leaning close to her ear, telling her to shut up, asking what the hell she's trying to say with the microphone still on. He asks if she still doesn't know her place and says all she ever had to do was go around acting like a saint as usual. What's there to complain about to pull a stunt like this? He warns her that if she doesn't want everyone to see her mouth torn open, she'd better stay quiet. He turns off the microphone and apologizes to the reporters, saying that, honestly, it seems the saint is being blackmailed and giving a false statement, but not to worry, he'll keep her safe. He apologizes again to the press and says the conference will end there. One man says to wait, but just as they're about to close things, a huge wave of mana erupts. Lewis approaches and says Gun died in the Demon Tower 20 years ago. What else do they need to know? And even if Lee had returned, all he would have to do is show himself. He asks why he hasn't appeared yet. The press starts asking who is blackmailing the saint, why the culprit keeps mentioning Lee's name, and if they shut the conference down like this, suspicions against the saints will only grow. They demand to know if there's anything more he wants to say. The Cancer Saint thinks these damn insects don't know their place, until a voice approaches, asking if he's planning to eliminate reporters. It's the protagonist. He attacks, causing a huge impact, and Marty screams that he's here. Jean, collapsed, tries to say something, but Lee cuts him off, saying it's been a while, calling him a rotten crab and mocking how wrinkled his face still is. Then says, here's a gift. The Aquarius Saint wonders, is that a tail? Meanwhile, the lizard looks discouraged, now a slave to Ophiuchus. Gunn asks who the hell he is to decide when the conference ends and if he's lost his mind. Louis says it must be the tail of an infernal lizard and heard someone showed up and defeated it. The 13th Awakened says he's just playing around after creating a clone. The Cancer Saint says to think he'd discover his split ability just by looking and demands to know who the hell he is. The protagonist asks who he thinks he is and then says his name. Everyone looks on in shock. One guy even spits out the water he was drinking. Then they all burst into laughter, saying he claimed to be Lee. There's no way he could be that young and handsome. That's the joke of the year. Gene says he seems skilled, but if he thinks he's going to impress anyone with delusions, he should pick his target until he's cut off by being hit by Gunn. Gunn says they all need a beating to understand and asks what the hell they're staring at. Come on, all of you! They start running away, yelling that the maniac is chasing them. The Aquarius Saint panics, thinking she needs to take this chance to escape, until something blocks her path. The 13th Awakened asks where she thinks she's going and says she still has to finish telling the truth. The fact they ran from the Red Eye 20 years ago. The fact they lived like kings after almost killing him. The fact their clean public image is just the result of unlimited power from science. But their rotten personalities never changed. Anne tells her to say it all. Sophie thinks he's a deranged bastard already spilling everything until they notice something. The system notifies, a threatening energy from the darkest star is approaching. The energy grows stronger. People start screaming. Marty says it's impossible. The protagonist asks what she did. She answers it wasn't her. This whole mess isn't hers. And she's feeling the divine energy of a god. A voice says, so he really is the real deal. I don't know how you survived the demon tower, but now that you're back, it's time for the welcome party. At the Sagittarius Sanctuary, Hugo feels relieved that his children are safe and says he's going to eat some ramen for dinner. He sits on the couch and asks if anything good's on TV, until the reporter on screen says he's broadcasting live from the Saints press conference, and things there are completely out of control. In the middle of the press conference, a man claiming to be Lee barged in, and as you can see, he's now battling the Cancer Saint. And speak of the devil, the Cancer Saint's ability just exploded. Meanwhile, in the fight, a massive energy is being released around them, striking the people nearby. The protagonist moves and says these weak attacks won't work. Jean says he's got him. He strikes, but Lee blocks the attacks. Louis doesn't understand and notices his ability was stopped by a dagger. The crowd is stunned. Gun moves, leaping across the ground and releasing energy, charging toward him. The Cancer Saint asks if he spent the last few years training in acrobatics and tries to stop him from getting closer. The 13th Awakened slashes everything in front of him and asks if that's all he's got. He cuts his opponent, only to realize he just sliced a clone in half, and asks if he spent the last 20 years practicing clone techniques. Jean replies he'll take that as a compliment. Meanwhile, Sophie is screaming everything around them is being destroyed, and energy is surging into the people nearby. The protagonist calls him a bastard and asks how he's going to cover up this mess. Louis replies that he'll just deal with the consequences when they come, and for now, he's decided to finish things by using the crowd to his advantage. Lee realizes and asks if he was the one who defeated him in the tower. The Cancer Saint asks if he was that obsessed with finding the culprit and says it's pathetic that the hero who saved the world is clinging to petty grudges. People are just going to see him as a thug, not a saint. Gunn says he sure talks a lot of shit, especially for a damn coward who hides behind clones. Jean says they're not just clones. He created them using the life force of the journalists there. If any of them are destroyed, their life force will dissipate, and he can't guarantee their survival. The 13th Awakened says these dirty tactics really suit him. Louis replies those will be his last words, and that he can now be eliminated. He attacks but suddenly doesn't understand what's happening, and asks if he just struck a tail, and how that ended up there. The protagonist behind him says it's a new skill he gained in Drachma. Lee hits him and says, take this. New notifications arrive. He can now summon a target of his choice to act as a shield for the holder of the Ophiuchus constellation. He can summon something he's recently come into contact with and can create up to 3 targets, which are relocated based on the last one touched. Gunn asks if he's actually part of Jean, an advanced schizont, and says if he drowns him, the clone issue should be resolved. Lewis asks how he knew. More notifications arrive about the 13th sense, capable of detecting enemy weaknesses. The 13th Awakened says he already told him his tactics are cheap and dirty. He'd be an idiot not to notice. The protagonist tears out a core and says not even the Gemini constellation could locate it with their sensory skills. Notifications follow. Fragment of Cancer core acquired. A major breach has opened in Cancer's constellation power. The god of the Cancer constellation is deeply shaken. The energy of Cancer's constellation can now be absorbed. The dark star magic around the area has vanished. The wind starts to calm and the smoke clears. People collapsed on the ground begin waking up, dazed and asking what happened. They thought they were going to die. The Cancer Saint, on the verge of collapse, asks what the hell happened to him in the tower and says he can feel the power of a god pouring out of him. Lee says that even after taking such a beating, he still can't shut up. Jean says he'll retreat for now. He still has a few cards up his sleeve and could cause some problems. Gunn says, cards up your sleeve, huh? And adds that with this guy's personality, of course he wouldn't go quietly until he notices something. His phone rings. It's his friend. He answers and Hugo yells, calling him a bastard and asking what the hell he thinks he's doing. He says there's no time to explain, just get out of there now. He's watching the news and Gunn just took out one of Jean's high-level schizons, and a bunch of missiles are about to land right where he's standing. The 13th Awakened doesn't quite understand. Meanwhile, in the sky, a spaceship moves, locking onto its target as a rocket stage separates in space. When the core is revealed, a beam of light capable of splitting the sky in two is fired. It's not just a shot, it's a declaration of war to the entire universe. Earth has barely any time to react. The sky tears open, the atmosphere ignites, and the ground bends under the descending force with a single blast. The Mormont missile, a catastrophe-level special weapon created by Capricorn and Gemini after the disappearance of the 13th Awakened, was designed for a scenario in which a calamity beyond humanity's ability to defeat appeared on Earth. It's humanity's final card, capable of annihilating everything around a calamity with a single orbital strike. Meanwhile, on the phone, the protagonist says he can't believe they did something like that. Hugo says Jean programmed the missiles to launch automatically if his biometric signals disappeared. Lee remembers the moment he removed Jean's core and realizes that a high-class clone is basically indistinguishable from Lua. The Sagittarius Saint says, "This is no time to stand around. They need to get out of there." Gunn replies that running won't solve anything, and Jean could easily blow up cities like these. Otters asks if there's no way to stop this. The 13th Awakened looks to the side and says, "It's not like there's nothing they can do." He looks at the Aquarius Saint. At the moment of impact, the world stops breathing. The gathered energy reaches its peak, and then everything explodes in a blinding flash. A loudspeaker warns that the Mormont missile is now incoming, and all civilians must evacuate to the nearest shelter. This is not a drill. People flee in a panic, asking why an anti-calamity weapon is targeting the center of Seoul and if anyone there has teleportation abilities. One responds that they're out of luck. All the teleport slots were already sold. The brothers notice the chaos and ask what's going on and what they meant by Mormont. The sky cracks, and what was once light now turns into pure fury. An unrelenting series of explosions devastates everything in its path like divine hammers from above. The brothers look up and realize their uncle is in the sky. The protagonist holds Sophie in his arms, and she screams in despair, asking what he's planning. The system notifies, with the authority of Gemini's bishop, levitation and teleportation activated. Destination: in front of the Mormont missile. Lee, releasing powerful mana, charges toward the missile with Marty in his arms and calls her a bastard, saying he knows she can liquefy anything she wants, so melt this missile. The Saint asks how she's supposed to do that. He's asking her to crash into it head-on. Gunn replies he has no choice. If they don't stop it, she and everyone below will die. Since she spent 20 years doing nothing, it's about time she did something. Sophie tells him not to throw her, but the 13th Awakened doesn't hesitate and hurls her forward. Marty screams and curses him. The holy goddess of Aquarius descending is shocked by the situation. Sophie begs her to do something. The goddess curses, saying the guy's insane. The saint tells her to stop swearing and do something already. The goddess gives the saint every type of buff to keep her alive: magical power, vitality, willpower, defense, and luck. Marty screams in panic as tears fall from her face. The goddess activates her sovereign ability, Goddess's Tear, releasing powerful mana and trying to stop the missile with her power, and manages to shatter it into pieces. Sophie is thrilled she pulled it off until she realizes he didn't catch her. The protagonist says she did a good job and tells her goodbye, letting her fall. He says she did better than expected, though still a bit sloppy. Things could get really bad if all those fragments hit the ground. People below see the missile break and start to panic, asking if the fragments are now going to fall. What do? Lee says to wait. Since this was made by Gemini, he's going to send a proper greeting to the Purple Witch. He asks if his friend can hear him. Hugo recognizes his voice and asks if he figured out what to do about the missile. Gunn replies it's an emergency and there's no time to explain. He needs to borrow his absolute coordinate skill. Sagittarius's skill, absolute coordinate. The specified target will be teleported to a chosen location without fail. It has great synergy with any weapon that requires targeting. The Sagittarius Saint notices how desperate he sounds and wonders if the situation is really that bad, then says he'll transfer everything he has right now. The 13th Awakened thanks him and calls him Slave Number 1. He receives the skill and says it should be enough. The system notifies, with the authority of Gemini's bishop, teleport activated, with the authority of Sagittarius's Saint, absolute coordinate activated, and it repeats this several times. The protagonist says now it's time to send a little gift to the witch. They see a beam of energy in the sky, the missile and its fragments vanish, and they're saved. The brothers smile and say once again their uncle pulled it off. Choi wonders if that's really possible. He made the entire missile disappear until someone tries to speak telepathically, saying they're calling from the Ying Palace of Gemini's sacred domain and summoning him there immediately. Hyuk recognizes the voice and asks what the problem is. Ken calls him an idiot and asks what the hell he's been doing with bishop authority, and tells him to go to the palace right now because the Mormont fragments are falling. At the Blue House in the president's office, a voice asks what they mean by, "The 13th Awakened appeared." They say not only did he cause a huge scene at the Saint's press conference, he also defeated the Cancer Saint and stopped the missile launched at Korea, and ask how any of that makes sense. That's when the roof of the meeting room is blown apart. Lee arrives. Everyone looks shocked as Gunn, with his friend in one arm and Choi in the other, asks why they're whispering like rats, wondering if they're guilty of something. He says that since he's already there, he'll settle this too, and came to get his money. He heard they're holding the account with the money from selling his belongings, and remembered that on his way back home. He tried to access his account using tax authority but couldn't. He distinctly remembers assigning Tak as his proxy and asks if it isn't strange that happened, and what they think about it. One of them replies that the Korean government found it difficult to trust his friend. The protagonist doesn't understand and asks what he means. The man replies that his friend is a foreigner. After Lee disappeared, they couldn't entrust a saint from another country while Korea had no saint of its own. Due to various incidents, the Sagittarius faction grew weaker, and so, in the end, they put someone more trustworthy in charge. Lee punches him and asks, of all the people, they chose that damned purple witch. He says he already looked into it and is trying to be patient, but now the guy comes with this bullshit excuse. He asks who the hell they think they are to underestimate his friend. Hugo thanks him for caring and says he's fine. They should just end this. Gunn continues, saying he's Hugo's master and he can belittle his own slave, but bastards like them don't have that right. The Sagittarius saint feels awkward and wonders what Gunn just said. The 13th Awakened continues, saying Hugo may not be the most useful person in the world, with beauty as his only redeeming trait. Otters tries to stop him, telling him to knock it off, but the protagonist goes on, saying even if he's a pathetic, washed-up saint, they still can't treat him like that. And it's really pissing him off just saying all this. His friend even became a naturalized citizen, so why is he letting them treat him like this? Hugo agrees and apologizes, saying it was all his fault. Lee tells him to cheer up. The Sagittarius saint mutters that Gunn is the worst. Gunn releases his energy and says, anyway, before he starts smashing things, they better hand over his money. One of them tries to explain, what happened is, but someone cuts him off, telling him to shut up. Choi recognizes the voice. A woman arrives, emitting absurd mana. The 13th Awakened says she finally showed up. It's the Gemini Saint. She says they have already taken control of that account and tells him to get out. She'll need a fortune just to repair her Ying Palace. She asks if he's the one who sent the Mormont fragments there and says her palace is in ruins now. She demands if he has any idea how much damage was done and that he better be prepared to face the consequences. The protagonist tilts his head and asks who she is. Haiji becomes furious and tells him to shut up. She's going to eliminate him right now. She releases energy and Gemini's magical power fills the air. People panic, afraid they'll be caught in the blast. The system notifies, connected to powerful spirit. Hyuk gets excited. Gemini's strongest technique is about to be used, summoning a spirit from another world. The saint uses her spiritual summoning. The spirit queen, Layli Quinn, answers the spiritual call and is summoned. Haiji says this is the spirit queen, a being nearly on par with a divine god, and asks if he really thinks he can face her. Lee doesn't even answer. He just walks toward her and tells her to go to hell, launching her far away. Choi watches through the hole in the roof and calls her name. Gemini's magic power disperses. The spirit queen wants to go home. Gunn places his hand on her head. They look at each other. He pulls her back, asking where she thinks she's going. Layli tells him to let go. The system notifies, captured successfully. The 13th Awakened asks if she thinks he's an idiot and how she dares to run away. The queen apologizes until something crashes beside them. It's the Gemini Saint. Choi, worried, asks if she's okay. The user passed out, so the magical power control vanished, and the transformation borrowed from Aquarius was undone, until a voice asks if that wasn't the Gemini Saint. The protagonist asks if they saw that now and says he'd never seen her before and still thought she could win just by having the Spirit Queen on her side, and asks if they realized yet that the Purple Witch isn't going to save them, and now he wants his money back. After a while, the smoke inside the place clears, and Lee outside says he got his money back and suggests going out to eat something good today. Hugo asks if he doesn't think something strange. Gunn doesn't get it and asks what he means. Otters asks why the real Gemini Saint didn't show up, saying she's the kind of person who would use a meteor in the middle of the city if she got mad. The 13th Awakened says he was just thinking about what he meant, and that she didn't even show up after the palace mess. And that can only mean one thing. There's no way that hothead is keeping her temper under control, and he thinks he knows where she is and they're going to visit. At Jay's apartment, the protagonist asks why they aren't eating while working, grabs a burger, and asks if his nephew wants one. Sung looks and says he'll eat something else. Lee asks what they want. His niece says she'll take one, until Gunn suddenly spits out what he just ate. Yuhai says it was his recommendation. The 13th Awakened covers his mouth. Someone asks if Tak isn't coming. The protagonist replies he went out to run an errand, so he'll be late. Lee smiles, looking at Ares' relic inside a secure display, and says it's time to start the interrogation, and it's better if she answers properly. She replies she understands. Gunn holds a book that can seal anything and says being stuck in a transparent box is better than being sealed in a book, so it's better to be smart. And that damned purple witch hasn't shown up either. And she probably finds that strange too, which means it's not that she didn't show up, it's that she can't. So she must be trapped somewhere, and that place is Sung's apartment. The relic replies yes, and that he nailed it. The 13th Awakened says he'll give her a chance and asks where exactly she is. The relic hesitates to say, and the protagonist asks if she'll talk or if he should do it. The relic, trembling, points out where she is. Jimin asks if she's that angel statue that got broken that day. Lee picks up the statue and says he knew it. He thought it smelled terrible, and he had already said something before about how she kissed it or whatever. And that was probably that damned woman's coordinate marking spell. G remembers when she said that. Gun activates the 13th sense and can interfere with the spiritual world. The saint asks why Lily told him all that. Cheon looks surprised and asks if that's really the Gemini saint. Lady wonders why it had to be the worst guy possible who caught her and how it all ended up like this, and thinks that if things hadn't gone wrong that day, the day the demon tower collapsed, and remembers a big explosion happening and a teacup falling to the floor, and how she started feeling strange energy and wondered if it could be the 13th Awakened, and asked herself if he was alive, and thinks it's already shocking enough that he came back, and if of all places, he ended up in the apartment of his friend's son. And actually, that's a good thing. It's already within her reach, and she'll go personally. She used teleportation and was transported to the chosen location through Gemini's special ability. Only the soul is teleported, and it can be placed into a chosen target, and the target was the angel statue in his apartment. And it worked. The saint realizes possessing the statue succeeded and remembered when the statue was picked up, and a warning appeared that if the possessed target is destroyed during soul possession, she'd be unable to escape, and thinks the possession skill got messed up because the statue broke and now she's trapped and can't do anything. Ji said it was just a relic and that they can leave her like that. At the time, Heiji celebrated and thought that even though it's a crappy restoration skill, it'll do the job, and as long as they can repair the broken statue to its original state. So Min grabbed some glue and started putting the statue back together, but then a notification came up saying the possessed target had become trash and would be unable to escape. In the present, the protagonist picks up the statue and wonders how much he should torture her. So people talk about how great a job he did. The saint tells Layli to do something and that she should at least be able to escape one day. The queen replies no, that she can't and won't, and even if she does escape, he'll catch her again right away, so don't ask her to do something useless. Lee says she really understood her place. Lady says she's going to have a stroke until she notices something. She calls out to Sung, addressing him as the loyal Templar of Gemini, and, as the Castellan, orders him to attack his uncle now. Jay, confused, asks why and says he doesn't want to fight his uncle. The queen asks what he means and says he's always been the enemy, and if he's a Templar of Gemini, it's expected that he fights him. Sung replies that in that case, he thinks he's going to leave. Heiji asks what he means. Jay replies that he may be a member of the Gemini cult, but his uncle is his hero, and if he has to be an enemy just because he's part of Gemini, he throws his badge and says he'd rather quit the cult. Then something happens and everything begins to shake. The saint says no, this is divine punishment from a sacred god. The system notifies that the fate of Sung, a high-class Templar of Gemini, is shifting toward Ophiuchus. The sacred goddess of Gemini releases divine punishment and fury, and her magical power crushes him, causing vital fluid to pour from his eyes, nose, and mouth. They become worried about the boy. Jay collapses to the ground and Lady tells him to beg for forgiveness right now. And since he's a candidate for her successor, the goddess will forgive him, and to attack the enemy now because he's a cruel and unscrupulous man, not someone to trust and follow. Sung tells her to shut up and says they abandon people without hesitation if it brings them benefits. But his uncle always saved people in danger, and they are hypocrites who only care about themselves while claiming to save the world. Jay remembers moments when his uncle helped him and says he's not an idiot they can judge and look down on. The system notifies that the goddess manifests, and due to Sung's declaration, she increases the divine punishment to the highest level and gathers magical power, saying he will disappear along with that damned hero. The protagonist closes his eyes, activates his ability, releases energy, raises his hand, and uses abyssal/cutting her. At the same time, in the Ying Palace, everything is burning around and someone yells to remove the debris with magic. A mage uses his magic and says the fire is getting under control and to call everyone who knows water spells. He notices something and asks what it is and why he can't gather his magical power. People approach him saying something strange. They can't gather magical power. More precisely, they can't feel even a little of it and ask if he tried contacting Templars from other regions. Choi says they can't use telepathy or teleport, and the teleportation portal completely disappeared. Someone asks about the Templars who went to face the calamities, and they reply they tried contacting them, But telepathy isn't working, and they can't use any communication equipment because this is a calamity zone, and it's as if Gemini's magical power vanished completely. Meanwhile, in Sung's house, Cheon says the sacred magical power of Gemini's goddess has disappeared. The protagonist says he should be fine now and almost put him in danger, and thanks him for trusting his uncle until the end, and is really grateful for it. Jay looks and smiles. The Gemini saint asks what he did to her and why she lost the goddess's power. The system notifies that the connection between the saint and the goddess was weakened. Sacred gods consume many resources and face high risks when interfering with the world, which is why sacred gods usually send their powers to their successors, and the saints share this power with the Templars. For comparison, the sacred god is a power plant, the saints are the substations and transmission towers, and the Templars are the various devices and outlets. Lady thinks that's why the power vanished instantly. Lee asks how it feels to be a nobody without powers, and says that's something that damned crab loves to do. Sever connections with abyssal slash, which is a sovereign ability of Cancer and can cut anything. He continues saying that by combining it with his own ability, an interesting result occurred because he managed to cut even the contract between her and the sacred goddess. More notifications arrive saying that the act forbidden by God can cut everything, even memories, bonds, loyalty, and each time he becomes more proficient with the act forbidden by God, he will gain a new ability. Haiji asks what he did and says there's no way a goddess would allow that and he'll become the target of the true wrath of the goddess. Gun replies that he doesn't care and actually wants that, because that way the damned sacred goddess will show up in person. The saint doesn't understand until a strong light is suddenly emitted. Across the sky, lightning bursts from all directions, forming a whirlwind, and the sacred goddess of Gemini is furious about losing her connections to the saint and the Templars. She accepts the potential risks and exerts direct influence. Lady is surprised. Loud noises shake the area as a massive whirlwind forms, and the goddess appears in person. The protagonist says it's a flashy entrance. Freya glares at him and the system notifies a warning that the sacred goddess's power is violently unstable. With a single motion, she pulls an item from her inventory and summons chaos. Black and incandescent energy coils around her body. In that moment, she wears a surprised expression. She's clearly under attack. Lee is holding the core, absorbing her power, and the goddess is horrified to see a fragment from another sacred god. Gun says it's a shame he no longer has heaven's judgment, because if he had his sword he could easily cut everything, including sacred gods. More notifications appear. The creation workshop is being summoned. Usable materials, Cancer's core fragment, lightning and whirlwind of the goddess. The 13th Awakened says he has no choice but to use the second best option. He summons a weapon, a stormy abyssal scythe, a weapon created by sharpening a fragment of Cancer's core with the sacred goddess's lightning. Since the creation skill level is too low for the materials used, the item has very low durability and is single-use only. The protagonist smiles and activates fighter's instinct by consuming the collected divine power. Slamming the weapon to the ground and attacking, more notifications arrive. He inflicted significant damage to the sacred goddess of Gemini, and she suffers pain and humiliation. Everyone is stunned and asks if he really hurt a goddess and how that's possible. The abyssal scythe shatters. Lee asks if that's the best his improvisation could do. The goddess becomes enraged and loses all reason, attempting to descend into the world with her full power. A shadow army begins to march in formation, preparing for a decisive moment. Numerous beasts are summoned. The goddess crosses the boundary with her forces until flames appear and someone emerges before them. The brothers look shocked, realizing it's their father. Hugo tells her to stop the invasion, that anything beyond this is a violation of the rules, and asks if she forgot that sacred gods can't interfere in this world with their true bodies. The goddess says a mere Sagittarius can't stop her. She laughs, asking what a fallen sacred god and a saint can possibly do. Otters answers, of course, that with just Sagittarius's current power, they can't stop her, but asks if she thinks they're the only ones upset by the interference. Countless beings who watch over the world stop Gemini's descent. They express their disgust, saying direct interference is a major rule violation, and they push Gemini's army back to reclaim the territory. A highly complex celestial summoning circle is invoked with zodiac symbols and giant golden chains fired from the divine summoning circle. The other sacred gods, unhappy with the rule-breaking, activate restraints. To interfere further on Earth, a god must gather a vast amount of faith, experience, and attributes, and if she continues, it will reach maximum hostility with the other sacred gods. Hugo says that's unfortunate. The chains restrain the goddess, and Otters says it looks like the other sacred gods don't want this happening either, and asks if she really intends to push it further. Freya glares and begins screaming loudly, shattering glass and forcing people nearby to cover their ears. The goddess grits her teeth, saying she won't forget this day. The protagonist gives her the middle finger and mocks her, saying he bets she's really pissed now, and that next time, she can bring her appa too. The goddess becomes even more furious, bound by chains, and Lee completely crushes the pride of the sacred goddess of Gemini. He gains a reputation among the countless watchers of the world and obtains a large amount of divine throne experience and levels up. A special trial will occur when the throne of God reaches level 10. Favorability has accumulated and a special mission based on that favorability is activated. Ophiuchus Awakening. People sit on the ground in relief. Gunn hugs his partner and says it was just in time. Hugo says he's still frustrated thinking about what Freya did to his son, and shooting an arrow through her head wouldn't be enough. And she can wait because he's going to beat the hell out of that bastard. Otters smiles and thanks him silently, saying he got what he asked for at Ying Palace. It's a soul record, a certificate registering contracts with Gemini's avatars. The saint asks how he got that and says it should have been under maximum security. The Sagittarius saint replies that invisibility and infiltration are basic archer skills, and not to mention the emblem his friend gave him. The 13th Awakened opens the record and checks the list of avatars. Berserk, the one-eyed legendary warrior, Jotun, the giant king of giants, warrior king Jarl, the light of the whitest gods. Gemini's avatars completely surrendered to Ophiuchus, and he can either accept the surrendered avatars as his own or take them as prisoners. The commander avatar trapped under the sea beneath Ying Palace also surrenders. The protagonist thinks the commander avatar must be a mythical class avatar and asks why he should trust their surrender, telling them to offer proof of sincerity first. Then, Mana starts to gather around, forming a circle, and Gemini's saint is summoned. Lee doesn't understand, and Heiji's own spirit is shocked to see her body emerge from the Mana circle, and the system notifies that Gemini's avatars offered him the body of Gemini's saint. Gunn bursts out laughing, saying he can't believe this, and accepts. More notifications appear saying he accepted Gemini's avatar's surrender. Gemini's avatars have migrated to Ophiuchus, and he can now name them. The 13th Awakened says he's too lazy for that, so they'll go by rank. Bro 1, 2, and 3. The avatars are named. Heiji, desperate, says this must be a nightmare. The protagonist chokes her and says she's been completely abandoned, with her goddess fleeing and all, so she better answer the question properly. Was it her who struck him at the demon tower? The saint says she doesn't know anything and asks what he means by struck him. A mystical connection forms through touch. Lee continues choking her and says this is a fragment of the stormy abyssal scythe he used earlier, and asks if it's not shocking how it can fry even her soul and tells her to stop pretending and just confess. Heiji insists she really doesn't know. Gunn asks if she wants to find out what torture feels like in the spiritual state. Mana surges, and the saint says it was probably Virgo because Virgo has heaven's judgment. The fragments react. The 13th Awakened lets go of her and says it would have been painless if she'd just said that from the start, and since she gave good info, he'll return her body. Heiji thinks she's alive and notices someone approaching. It's the queen. She thanks him and says that even though she's being freed like this, she still appreciates the kindness. The protagonist says he made a mistake and accidentally gave her body to Lely. Elsewhere, Yang in teddy bear form says he already said it's pointless to try fixing things. Quinn asks what he means by that and says there's nothing to fix, and asks if he knows how many toxic clauses and broken magic contracts she sees just at a glance. The soul contract, created by the sect specializing in contracts, the 13th Awakened took everything Wei had monopolized. Lely says since they're settling that, she asked for the soul records too, because she'll enhance them and turn them into S-class. Lee says he got it and tells her to go deep. Then he looks to the side and notices something in a glass case. It's the saint begging to be let out. The system notifies new abilities obtained. Serpent contract, you can let it slide once, but not 3 times. Voices say they're finally his avatars. The new avatars heap praise, saying it's a great honor to become his avatars. The avatars get excited that he's looking at them and say just seeing his great eyes excites them. Hugo says he's never seen anything like this before, and avatars sure are proud. Gunn says that's what he said. The avatars ask how a mere servant dares interrupt. The Sagittarius saint backs off. The protagonist says they seem to have misunderstood. The avatars attack Hugo, and Lee says he's not a servant, he's a slave. The avatars say so, he was a slave, and ask how a slave dares to speak like he knows something in front of their master. Gunn tells them to stop talking about him and focus on themselves, and asks why they abandoned Gemini and went through the trouble of coming here. The avatars respond that it's because they couldn't endure the abuse from the sacred goddess of Gemini. The 13th Awakened asks if that's serious. They reply that actually it's because they saw her get beaten up by him. The protagonist says he's glad they're being honest. The avatars say it's not just them, but the other avatars, and even the commander want to surrender to him, but unfortunately, the commander is trapped in the sea beneath the sacred domain and can't come. Currently, humanity has lost more than half of its lands to the mysterious civilization of calamities. At a glance, it may seem like saints and calamities are evenly matched, but in reality, they're not even able to attempt reclaiming the lands lost to that mysterious civilization. Lee thinks that if it's in the sea near Ying Palace, it must be somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, which is close to the territory of the mysterious civilization. So it's better to pay a visit and check the current situation. The avatars say that in any case, since they've submitted to him, they swear their lives and loyalty to him. Gun says he's excited about that and calls them the Three Bros. Sung says it's just what he'd expect from his uncle, even those high-class avatars are afraid of him. And that's cool. His sister agrees, smiles, and says she's glad she proposed to him. The 13th Awakened looks uncomfortable. Hugo looks at him and asks what she meant by proposed. Young asks if that makes him his father-in-law until he's hit by flames Otters just launched. The protagonist asks why he doesn't put the bow away first. The Sagittarius Saint is furious, yelling that he's never even heard his daughter say, "I love you," not even on Father's Day. He starts screaming and releasing flames. Lee dodges and tells him to calm down. Hugo says he must be eliminated right now. Otters goes invisible and attacks. Gun asks if he's actually mad, then Ed activates the Eye of God fixation and begins detecting his friend's magical power until he stops. The 13th Awakened dodges another attack. The Sagittarius Saint keeps aiming and tries hitting him in every possible way while spewing fire. The protagonist dodges everything easily and asks if he's some kind of insect, telling him to stop being annoying. The system notifies that Sagittarius was humiliated, disposition has increased, and a large amount of Divine Throne experience was gained. Lee, after catching all the arrows, looks. Hugo activates his sovereign ability, Ring of the Sun God, and Gun says he's really going all out. The Sagittarius Sacred God asks if he's really okay with this. It's his house, and not to mention the loan on his son's house, which is in ruins, still has many installments left. Otters causes an explosion. Gun thinks he's like someone he knows who doesn't mind burning down his own house and decides he needs to stop him. His kids shout, "No!" and the Sagittarius Saint asks what they mean. Chian says he has no chance against his uncle and asks how the hell he plans to beat him. Then Hugo realizes it's true and lets his guard down. The 13th Awakened hits him and calls him an idiot. Otters ends up with a bump on his head, and the protagonist asks if he's come to his senses and why he got so mad over kids just being kids, and asks if he looks like the kind of guy who'd seduce his friend's daughter. He says they're just embarrassed to express their feelings, but are more grateful than he can imagine. Even now they bought him gifts to cheer him up. His kids approach and say they brought strawberry cake and the coffee he likes. The Sagittarius Saint tears up and goes to hug them, but Sung dodges and goes to his uncle, saying he sent the fight video to the reporters like he asked. Lee pats his head and says, "Good job." Jay gets excited and says his uncle patted his head and he's never washing his hair again, then gives him the cake too. Gun asks why there are so many strawberries on the cake. Hugo notices his cake has no strawberries and asks what happened to his. His daughter says she gave them all to his uncle. Otters immediately runs at him to attack. Later, in the same place, the house has a destroyed roof with smoke coming out. Laylee is stitching up where Yang got hit and he says, now that's what he calls taking care of your kids. In the sea near the capital of the Philippines, Manila, lightning bursts across the sky, and several armed people in armor say they heard it was a red-level calamity and that it's terrifying and ask if they'll really be okay even with so many people there. Then a man yells for them not to be afraid, that danger is opportunity. And while their saint is absent, they will defeat the red-level calamity, Thousand Arms. And by doing so, their lion will prosper, and they'll show the world that humanity will take another leap into the future. Cheon is also at the scene thinking he just wants to go home. Meanwhile, inside a cabin, an old man says those men are complete barbarians, being violent for no reason, not that he cares, and asks if the gift he sent to them has arrived yet. Meanwhile, at Sagittarius's house, someone shows up. He opens the door and it's his secretary, saying it's been a while and asking how he's been, why the house is in that state and what happened there. Hugo says not to even ask. Un asks if he's watching the Thousand Arms raid too. He replies yes, that his daughter was sent there and asks what's in the box. The secretary says it was in front of his door, so she brought it in and asks if it's a delivery. Then the box asks where the 13th Awakened is. They immediately move away from it. Elsewhere, the system notifies that the production tool is low level and the materials were damaged. The protagonist is holding a tool in his hand, realizing it broke again, and asks how many times that's happened already. More notifications arrive saying that to create the desired rank item, higher rank equipment is needed. He asks if this is the limit of the production hammer and thinks it's a shame he lost the hammer of guaranteed conquest. And he has no idea where that thing ended up over the last 20 years. And it's hard to make divine artifacts above intermediate level with slime, so he needs to stock decent weapons before facing Virgo. The system notifies that a member hired by another zodiac sign secretly entered the sanctuary where Ophiuchus and insignificant Sagittarius reside. Meanwhile, after the box is opened, a voice asks if that's the Sagittarius saint. The statue says it's been a while and introduces itself as Sergeyevich. Hugo says he has a terrible hobby and that's something Yang would do. Then someone shows up saying he heard someone snuck into the sanctuary, and it's the protagonist, saying so it was this old goat. Sergeyevich says it's been a while and is relieved he's healthy. The goat introduces himself again and asks if he remembers him. Lee says Sebastian, and the goat insists, saying it's Sergeyevich. He's a Capricorn saint and, like the 13th Awakened, specializes in crafting. Ever since the 13th Awakened appeared, there hasn't been a single prominent weapon in the world that hasn't passed through his hands. The goat says, in any case, he's relieved he's doing well, and the reason he came to find him is because he wanted to apologize for past events. Gun throws him into the air and punches him. Otters asks if they can really ignore what he said. The protagonist says he just spouts crap and asks what the hell a guy who didn't even help him with ingredients means by co-op. Meanwhile, the old man controlling the goat elsewhere says his temper's still the same until someone opens the cabin and says it's time for him to show up. The old man opens the curtain and says, "How about taking a look at those 1,000 arms?" The reporter is filming and she says they're in Manila, Philippines, and they're there to cover everything about the red level calamity raid happening now. The massive calamity the 13th Awakened massacred 20 years ago, 1,000 arms. Another 1,000 arms of what seems to be the same species appeared in the sea near Manila. As powerful as red level calamities are, many powerful agents have gathered there too. The Vice Saint and Captain Oliver are the Leo beasts responsible for that battlefield. Transformation magic experts and naval warfare tactics masters, Pisces. The Iron Wall that took the role of frontline defense, Taurus. The battlefield saint capable of deflecting a bomb with sacred power, Aquarius. And Capricorn, who took the role of producing and strengthening the various weapons needed for battle. Many soldiers were sent there for the sake of strategic warfare. Additionally, the Capricorn saint appeared in person. The protagonist watches on TV and asks what that old man is doing there, and they say it looks like the Capricorn saint is trying to do something. Then they notice an item. It's a divine artifact from Capricorn. He summoned the Hammer of Guaranteed Conquest. Hugo asks if that wasn't the one he used back then. The reporter continues saying that the crafting specialist saint before the battle begins will strengthen the divine artifacts with that hammer. Capricorn's artifact-enhancing skills are world-renowned. Lee is super irritated, yelling for them to stop talking crap because that thing is his and calls him a damn goat, already pissed that he stole his items and asks if he's still going to keep showing off, saying this is ridiculous and that he'll have to beat him up before going to deal with Virgo. Gunn runs and says he's going right now and is going to wipe out that bastard. Until he hears that the calamity has appeared and the reporter also says something absolutely massive is emerging from the depths of the ocean. 1,000 arms, she repeats twice. Everyone watches closely. The beast rises from the sea. 1,000 arms, danger level, red. The armored guards tell all units to prepare for battle, but one of them says to wait a second because there's something hanging from the tip of 1,000 arms tentacle. It's a man. And they say that's Stephen Marker, telling the beast to drop its bone. At the Drachma auction house in a VIP room, someone says twins, and that the divine relics also belong to them this time. With that, the first auction session ended, and after a brief break, the second session began. The protagonist says it's his again. Choi congratulates him and says he can buy as much